The previous head of the demonic forest, the current head of Taesan Cho Pension, asked Mugon's son if he remembered Iron's childhood. Mugon replied that the sister was smart and persistent. Pension said that was true. She could literally grasp everything on the fly, thanks to the heavenly Yin. Heavenly Yin is a feature of the body in which innate Yin energy favors rapid progress in the study of sciences and martial arts. However, its disadvantage is that the body gradually deteriorates in the process of use due to the fact that the vessels are strongly influenced by Yin energy. Pension said some warriors call it a blessing, but for them and him it is only a curse that took away a loved one. Mugon asked his father, does he regret breaking the bond with Iron? Pension replied that yes, that was his only regret. He would have wanted her to spend the rest of her life outside the demon forest. Should have taken her back then. But after learning that she had, while fighting the disease, given birth to a child, as a father, it was hard for him to accept this betrayal. Mugon said since that is their position, he takes this opportunity, he would like to say something. Being the current head of the demonic forest, he is going to make Chin Murup, Cho Iron's son, the next overlord. A letter arrived from Shaanxi province. A young man will arrive here very soon. This decision has been made solely for the benefit of the forest. So he asked him to be lenient. Pension immediately thought of Iron's child. And this is his grandson. And when did he get to be so mature? The next morning in Shaanxi province, near the Huanghe River, something incomprehensible began to happen and the wind became very strong. Suddenly, between the mountains, someone was fighting a man who looked like a demon, and he wanted this guy dead. The demon was so strong that it didn't stop after each attack, and in a moment, it used the Millennium Dragon's paw swing. But suddenly the guy was smarter and faster, and easily dodged the enemy's strong attack. The fellow was greatly surprised and asked him who he was, but the enemy replied that he was the Dragon of Huanhe. Dragon Huanhe asked him, why isn't he using his internal energy? Then we'll just have to kill him if he doesn't raise his spirits. Sanshin Chin Murup replied that in that case he would be kicked right off, and he would only get a slap on the wrist. The dragon, with a smile on his face, asked what he was going to get in the hat. But what kind of weak-minded teacher does he have? Murup asked him, is he provoking? Such tricks won't work on him. And then he would show him what he had been waiting for. The dragon asked in surprise, seriously? Murup answered him to look carefully. He had learned it from the holy weakling teacher. Murup began to twist with his hands, and suddenly there was a sudden squeak that continued and cut his ears. His eyes changed drastically, and a huge smoke sprinkled from his breath. But the screech went on and on. Murup used the god-level provocation technique, and at the end showed him his middle finger, and said he was going to burst out laughing. The dragon got even more angry after such actions, and asked him, middle finger? Does he think he was hurt by that? The dragon started swearing and said he would finish him off. Suddenly, Murup saw it open up and deliver an explosive blast of heaven. The dragon didn't expect this, didn't even realize he would do this at this point in their dialogue. The dragon was very surprised and said it only took one hit. I wish he was dead. He couldn't believe such a thing, that some sucker had defeated him, one of the world's top 10 masters. Murup told him to get up and punch him from his fist, and then asked him to wake up and sing. The dragon replied for him to stop. It's not like he fell asleep. Murup said he found someone to pour into. He's been asleep for about 30 minutes. Why is he so surprised? The dragon replied to kill him and victory was on his side. Murup says they're past it, they weren't fighting him to the death anyway. And he advises to get busy circulating energy. The dragon started laughing and said the guy was a fool. But Murup turned around and replied that he would say something before he left. He's leaving this place today. If he comes back here looking for a fight, he'll really kill him. Murup started to walk towards him, but Dragon stopped him and said the same, nodding to him. The guy punched him again and replied that it was for his teachers. Just a slap in the face? If he were him, he'd break both his arms. Is he even inferior in generosity to him? He thought he had no enemies in this world except the other 9 masters. But meeting him made him think about a lot of things. Dragon Hupn gives him his title as one of the 5 dragons. But Murup interrupts him and says he'll get around to it. And why would he need it? And he said to go without it somehow. The dragon answered the young lord not to refuse. It is fate. He will prepare a place for him among the 5 dragons. Did the guy say he was leaving Sanshin? Where will he be found to challenge him again then? Murim replied that he wasn't leaving for good. He was going away for a while. He'll never find him. He's good at hide and seek. Murim said goodbye to him, and after saying goodbye told the dragon to come back if he wished to die. The guy immediately thought that it turns out we don't have to worry about the mountain caves for a while. Now the demonic forest was next. This is the place where his mother was born and raised. The place that abandoned him and his mother. Of course, he travels to the demonic forest to be the new heir. But since he is in Sichuan province, he will be one step closer to the Murim. His past should be kept secret if possible. Murim was on his way and couldn't believe that even that could happen. An outlaw becomes an heir. Half a month later, the demonic forest of the outer building had rumors that said his father was a hunter Odizan. He must be an extraordinary person too. The kid replied that he thought the mistress had returned at all. Looking at the kid's face, a friend told him that he agrees with it. He could tell by his eyes that his soul was as good as mistress. The boy asked, is he so sure of that? The friend replied that of course. As they say, the eyes are the mirror of the soul. His heart is the color of white jade. The guy started laughing and said he was up to his old tricks again. The friend replied that he was giving him a tooth. At that time Murim sat above the roof of the house and said that he had a good fate. But he came, but it was unusual to be the heir. Murim asked Son what he would say. The boy was barely hanging on to the edge of the roof, and was very glad he had found him. Murim told him not to overdo it and asked if he needed help. Son replied that he would rather go down himself. Let him not think that by hiding on the roof he would be able to evade today's. But suddenly Son couldn't help himself and started to fall. And on the afterdeck told the guy Lin one word. Murim caught him and said he should have climbed up on the roof. Almost gave him a heart attack. Let him tell me what's on the schedule today. Sonia replied that first he would like to thank him for his efforts. First he has a lecture on the history of the Murim. Then a training session, followed by dinner with the head of the Tessen chamber. And at night reading martial arts books. Did he come here for this? Son replied that of course he was the only heir. That's why they called him. They thought they saw something different in him. Murim said he had heard so much about the demon forest. In reality the land is empty. Sign replied that Lel might seem deserted now. But his mother said there used to be a lot of people here. Unless he's wrong, it's about the bloodbath of 8. He should hear about it at the lecture. Son approached the Lord and said that the heir had arrived. The Lord greeted the boy and replied that he had prepared tea and sweets. Murim was surprised and said that someone's legs had sharply gone. He went to the old man and told him to finish quickly. The old man replied that the gentleman was in a hurry. Murim apologized and said that, but he didn't care for his lecture at all. It was the head of the Narim San Hogan. Hogan told the boy that his mother didn't like them either. However, they are necessary to survive in the Murim. Murim asked him what he would be broadcasting about today. Hogan replied that it was about the warriors of the Apex Murim. Let him listen carefully. His brigand skills will not defeat them. Murim said he thought he would have to face them often, so let him remember. Hogan was pleased and suggested that they start already. Hogan asked the master if he had heard of the top 10 masters of the world. Murim replied to lay it out. Hogan began to say that the 10 strongest warriors of the Murim. They are the 2 emperors, the 3 kings, and the 5 dragons. Altogether they are called the 10 best masters of the world. Murim replied that he understood everything. Hogan said that in addition to them, there is also a holy dragon hero who saved Murim in the Great War. Due to his uniqueness, he is not categorized as one of the 10 great masters. There is a tale of the 10 best masters of the world and a holy dragon who surpassed the heavenly level. How's he doing, I wonder? Murim replied that every other person had heard of this story. Hogan said he was glad that he had too. They say that recently another warrior took the place of one of the 5 dragons, the unknown leader of the bandit gang Sanshin. He was given the nickname of the Faceless Mountain King. Murim was surprised and asked the head if he could repeat it again. Hogan said Sankan's gang. He is also called the Master with 3 arms and 6 legs. Murim asked, a master with 3 arms and 6 legs? The head replied that this psycho is truly elusive. Faceless because no one knows for sure what he looks like. And a mountain king because he owns all the major mountain caves. Murim stopped the chapter and remembered the dragon telling him that there was a place for him among the 5 dragons. He congratulated on becoming one of the top 10 masters of the world. Murim remembered that strange lizard had ended up handing over his seat to him. But why had he done that? In the distant past, two children were running from enemies. And Appa was telling his sister that he understood that it was scary, but you had to be patient. And if they wait a little while, they will go away. The sister asked her brother, what about him? Appa replied that he would hide somewhere else, and on no account let her stay out until the sun comes up. The nurse said she understood, but suddenly he heard a warrior shouting to his men to search. The enemy is somewhere near. Appa said for his sister to get inside and hurry up. Appa decided to call them to his side, and started running away from them without even looking back. The warrior told his men to catch him. Appa saw the shadow of the warriors running after him and realized he was going to be caught. But suddenly one of them threw a knife at the kid, but it missed a little and only scratched the kid's arm. Appa was wounded and decided not to run away anymore. When the pursuers saw him, they were surprised to hear that he was a child. But the chief said it was not just a child, but a child of Satan. He must die immediately. But suddenly the guy asked the main man, had he forgotten the holy dragon's instruction? You can't touch children and those who don't learn martial arts. The head replied that it was this carelessness that had led to the World War. Hadn't they all paid the price for not uprooting the 8th century 200 years ago? One of them lost his wife and daughter, and the other lost his only little sister. And he lost his family's mind all at once. And lest there be a second bloodbath of 8, every single person from the hidden valley must die. But suddenly out of the blue someone came and told them to stop. The old man said that he understood their feeling, but the boy was not guilty of anything. The chief said to give his name. Or are they from the hidden valley? The old man asked, the hidden valley? No, they're not from there. The chief said to go where they were going then. That puppy is Satan's child. The old man replied that he could not agree with him, and as far as he knows, this place wasn't involved in the war against the 8. The only thing they have in common is their roots, but the former and the latter are completely different things. The warrior said this is the first he's heard of it. Where is the proof? But suddenly the chief replied that no proof was needed. This sucker is absolutely the same demon. The old man immediately told Murim to act. Murim immediately pounced on them, and with his quick speed took away everyone's swords so they wouldn't make a mess. Murim told them to get out of here immediately, and he won't tell them twice. The warriors were surprised, but Glavny could not accept such a defeat and grabbed the knife that was behind his back. But Murim's gaze showed that he already knew there was a knife behind the enemy, and the enemy realized this and turned away. The old man said it was all because of him, and he turned to Murim and said that when he was young, he had once taken a boy under his wing. And then it turned out that he was in some 8-person group and started a war. He wouldn't do that, would he? Murim replied that he would see about that. The old man got angry and told his disciple that he was a rascal. The old man told the apprentice that as he already knows he will be retiring soon, so he has one serious request for you. Murim replied that he was listening. The old man said that many people were dying in the hidden valley now. Let him help him to make it possible for them to live, seeing the light before them. Murim replied that the task was not an easy one. The old man said that for someone who had mastered the sacred technique of the 8 heavens thanks to the heavenly Een, since its internal power was sealed due to the strong flow of Een energy, it would take some sweat, but it wouldn't let itself be harmed. Murim asked, you can just finish off a holy dragon. The old man replied that such revenge never ends well. How about naming the mountain settlements he would defend? Sanshin? In other words, the common sky. Murim agreed and replied that he would do as the teacher said. The old man said that since the boy could also become a target, he should always be on guard and keep his eyes open. Murim replied that he understood everything. He promised to be careful. The old man told his disciple in farewell to forgive him, but Murim said it was the teacher apologizing to him. Looks like he became some faceless mountain king and one of the 10 strongest warriors. One of the top 10 masters is the leader of a band of bandits. These are 2 diametrically opposed groups. But suddenly the leader approached him and asked if the master could hear him. Murim realized that the teacher's first pupil and the leader of the 8 who killed countless innocent people. With his destructive techniques, he provoked a bloodbath of 8, taking many lives. Even now, A huge number of warriors were ruthlessly slaughtering the inhabitants of the hidden valley. That's why he hides his real identity and plays the fool who doesn't know what a Murim is. He remembered the boy telling him everything. And it's all the fault of the strange dragon Huang He. Let it fall into his hands and he will know what pain is. Hogan at this time asked the Lord for something to say. The head asked him, is something wrong? He turned pale somehow. Murim replied that he wasn't feeling well. And he asked the old man if they could finish for the day. Hogan said that was a coincidence. He had a story about a Murimian who was very active in the martial arts despite his health problems. Murim was very tired and asked him to stop. But Hogan said he suddenly remembered a story about a man who became the strongest master of the world by working every day without rest. Chief Pension spoke at the meeting that since Mr. Chin's basic lessons in Murimism are coming to an end, we should gradually introduce the lessons needed for the heir. What do the others say? Hogong replied that in his opinion, at this moment, when the situation of Sichuan is so unstable, the place of the heir cannot be left empty for too long. Why not go to the really important step now? The head of Wirim, Yu Hassan, replied that he thought otherwise. Pension laughed and said he thought the head and would not get a word in today. Well, let him speak. Hassan said they were saying that Chip Murim is the direct heir. But what matters is whether he's blood descendant or not. He asked the others if he had a chance to take over the title. Therein lies the problem. And as head Tessan knows, none of them took the sudden appearance of the young man positively. Let them agree it would be strange for them to accept God knows who as heir with open arms. Let him give them the opportunity to test his abilities. Pechan replied that such was the viewpoint. Since that was their opinion, the head of Wirim, let him give Murim a task that would remain secret even from himself. Let its content and level be appropriate. Hassan faced the gentleman and asked why he was here now. Why say in such a veiled way that he doesn't trust him? Let him lay out what needs to be done. Hassan was very angry and said that Kanha's tavern. Let him return this place. It is located in the northwest of Sichuan province. Murim asked with surprise, return it? Was it stolen or something? Hogan replied that yes, it was. The tavern was originally run by the demonic forest, but it was taken away by Cole's group afterward. This is one of the clans of the wicked path. They are extremely difficult to deal with. Murim began to laugh and said that it was not for nothing that they say that a rich man, if he goes broke, has enough food for 3 more years. The guy asked, had the demonic forest fallen so low that it was already being taken away by all sorts of bulls? Hassan got angry and replied to the gentleman to watch his words. Kolsa is not just a gang. Murim also lost his temper and said he wasn't sure how someone who had his business taken away by some shithead could yell at him. Murim apologized and said he was very sensitive to sounds. And how does he know the tavern should be returned? Hassan replied that that was correct. A guard would be assigned to him for his safety. Let him take it with understanding. Murim wondered who the old man was pouring it to. They decided to put surveillance on his tail, not guards. Hassan thought the kid was a boor and saw that he was good for nothing. Murim said he'd do his assignment. Hassan replied that they had 5 days to do everything. And now they would see how he would sing afterwards. Murim said he knew it. He doesn't need 5 days. 2 days is enough to get everything done. He'll be done in that time. Hassan thought that if it were that simple, they would have gotten the tavern back long ago themselves. He was sure the kid understood that, too. Murim said, and about the guards, he'll choose who to go with. They'll be watching him anyway. Hassan replied that they were doing it themselves first of all for his own safety. And he saw that this kid could think. Doesn't his head feel tight? Murim said that if he's done, he should vacate the premises. He wanted to get some rest before he left. Hassan agreed and told him to rest. Hassan closed the door behind him and thought that the task wasn't easy. But they didn't want any rabble as heirs. But the lads got spirit. But suddenly at night Hogan burst in unexpectedly and shouted to his master. Murim got very angry and said that how they were bothering him. Hogan replied that he had heard that the head of Urim was here. What did he say to him? Murim tried to come to his senses and mumbled various words, but then said he was not asking for help from others. Hogan immediately thought that this evil old man must have tasked the gentleman with something very complicated. He told the Lord that if the area of the assignment goes beyond the demonic forest. And then Murim replied that he asked to let him choose his own guards. The lectures would have to be suspended for a while. Hogan replied that of course. What lectures at a time like this? Doesn't he really need help? Murim replied that if they told him to do it on his own, there was nothing he could do. He, a stranger, had no other options. Hogan asked the guy, is he sure he can handle it? Murim asked, is there any point in talking? After all, it's the same everywhere. Murim told the old man not to even think of following him. It's only about him. Hogan asked the gentleman where he was going. The boy replied that he was going to get some air. Murim came out and knew it was a good time to find an ass adventure. Murim realized on the way that his guide named Son was already asleep. It must have been because it had only been a short time since his arrival. Murim said one bamboo and nothing else. And now he was lost. But suddenly he turned around and asked, what is that sound? Could it really be pipa? Murim said he was good at playing. So he decided to go and look at the musician. Suddenly, behind a bush, he saw a guy playing a pipa. The guy was singing a beautiful love song and didn't even notice that Murim was standing behind him listening to him. But suddenly, all of a sudden, he stopped and saw that the stranger was looking at him very strangely, that he was even frightened. They stared at each other for a few minutes, and suddenly Murim smiled and said the guy sings well. Murim said the kid's got real talent. What's his name? The guy said his name is Deha. He's in the 6th team of the Black Blade Squad. Murim asked what he was doing here on a night like this. Deha replied that he was spending his last night as a warrior, and he can't take up arms anymore. Judging by the guy's clothes, is he the gentleman they're talking about these days? Murim replied to the guy that he was a quick thinker. He didn't understand why he couldn't hold a gun anymore, by the way. Deha asked him what color he thought the moon was. Murim was surprised and replied that of course it was yellow. Suddenly Deha started laughing and said that everything was in black and white for him. Murim replied that he must have failed the mission because of that. Deha was surprised and said that the boy had guessed. Murim decided to find out about everything and told him to spit it out. Deha said that he was the commander of the Black Blade Squad that is in charge of special assignments in the demonic forest. First, everything was going well. They were assigned to deal with the outsiders who had invaded the Eastern Division. As luck would have it, their uniforms looked very much like the enemy's. Suddenly someone shouted to him in the midst of the war for the commander to help his warrior. Deha replied that he was on his way. Let him hold out for a while. Deha swooped down on the enemies and used his shard destruction technique. But suddenly the warriors were surprised and all looked at the commander. He ended up mistaking allies for enemies and seriously wounded his comrades. The warriors shouted that they had to leave. Their stupid commander had lost his mind. His unit was unable to defend the Eastern Division, so he made a forced retreat. After that, he was demoted. But because of his guilt, he could not fight any more battles. Deha said that's a lousy story, isn't it? And thanked the guy for listening to him. And since Murim is the heir of the demon forest, no one will touch him in Chongqing, and wishes him good luck in the battle. Murim asked him where he was going. Deha replied that he thought he would go to some quiet place and farm. He does not belong here. Murim asked what the hell else is agriculture. You can see that he can't get military discipline out of his mind. Deha asked the guy what he meant. Murim replied to tell him to stop talking already, and told him to give the sword. Murim took the sword and drew it out and said that the one who pours in that he is retiring has a well-maintained weapon. He's a warrior to the core. A tidy sword is the foundation of the demonic forest's martial fundamentals. He realized that this guy's pride wouldn't allow him to completely quit. Murim told the lad to take him to Kanha's tavern and he would fix his head. Deha replied that he would repeat once more that he was leaving these parts. Murim looked at him angrily and asked what he was saying. He didn't belong in the demonic forest? Deha replied that was correct. Murim rejoiced and said that then a new one they will definitely find. He suggests teaming up like an outsider with an outsider. Deha realized the carefree nature of this guy, and a life with nothing left to lose. If she followed him, would he be able to change? After 2 hours, they reached the northwest of Sichuan province, the Kanha Tavern. Deha was greatly surprised and saw that they had succeeded. The master had won. 2 hours ago in Sichuan province in Chongqing City, Deha said that it has 4 exits. One is in the north, the second in the east, the third in the west, and the last in the south. All of them are connected by 2 paths resembling a cross, and the demon forest controls the northeast. Murim asked what about the other 3 exits. Deha replied that the 2 in the southern part were administered by a clan called the Great Blade. The remaining one is shared among the clans in cooperation with the Great Blade. Murim said that's why the Demon Forest was so fed up with the Wicked clan. They've got bigger fish to fry around here. He asked if one attacked the Coles gang, would the Great Blade get involved? Deha replied that given the occasion, yes. But they don't want an all-out war either, as they would lose a lot of warriors if they clashed with the demonic forest. Murim asked what their chances of victory were in a battle against a Great Blade. Deha replied that a definite defeat. Although the number of top-tier masters on both sides is roughly the same, the scale of combat forces is vastly different. The warriors of the unholy Chongqing clan and the Ronins are on the side of the Great Blade. Murim said, then one should just not give them a reason to attack. Then what is he going to do? Murim replied by pointing his finger to go here. This tavern will become his. Deha was greatly surprised and didn't even realize what he was carrying. Murim told him to go and buy meat. We can't have them exposed. He'll make some noise. He doesn't need to get involved. Deha asked him if he would go alone or together. Murim replied that there were reasons for everything. Let him wait outside no matter what happened. Let him not go inside. Deha replied to the gentleman that he understood. But did he really have some kind of plan? But suddenly everyone in the tavern stopped when they saw someone enter. Murim immediately went to the supervisor and told him to give them a bottle of hot liquor and a snack. But suddenly one of the men called him handsome and said he hadn't seen him here before. Was he passing through? Murim replied that yes, that's right. The man said he speaks right away as he doesn't seem to know the rules. At this time they take seats here in a slightly different way. The man asked him if he would show him his wallet. It was the leader of the Kolsa gang. Murim immediately realized that it's the bastards from the unholy path who don't know how to do things differently. He told him that everywhere is really the same. Are they such insatiable miners? They can't get enough of everything. He realized that the most effective way to get what he wanted was to negotiate. Muban became very angry at such words, and immediately set about fighting him and teaching him a lesson. Murim realized that a reason was needed for negotiations. Muban punched him in the face, and one of his men grabbed his arms and said the kid couldn't even dodge. He realized that the Great Blade would have no reason to intervene in these negotiations. He had simply come to the inn for a drink, and this incident would be gratuitous violence on Chol's part. Muban immediately hit him with an elbow right on the nose. Deha stood outside the door at this time and said that he had heard the Lord knows the basics of martial arts for self-defense. If a Great Blade would fit into all this. But suddenly the door collapsed behind him, and Murim flew out like a sack. But suddenly Deha looked into the tavern and saw that he wasn't there, and the brigands were saying he'd had a good kicking. He hasn't had such a good time this year either. Murim said at this time that he was outside. Deha picked him up and was telling the heir to wake up. Murim asked him if he had seen it, and so a Great Blade like that won't get involved. And then you just have to not give them a reason to attack. Muban said that he was a snot-nosed freeloader from the Demon Forest who couldn't even use a sword. And then Deha realized why the Lord had brought him here. The men asked, hadn't that guy just called him heir? Such a bastard can't be the heir. Deha asked them, did they even know who had just been touched? Everyone immediately turned pale and said that this guy was lying. Deha replied, telling them rightfully, this master is the heir to the demonic forest. And it was over literally in an instant. It turns out that Qin Murim didn't fight the Coles gang, which is part of the Great Blade, but found himself beaten for no reason. There was no occasion to involve the Great Blade. And the Coles gang remained in great debt to the demonic forest. The doctor at this time was telling the guy that he was very unlucky with the places that were hit. There is a possibility that he may never fully recover. Murim was frightened and asked him what he was saying. Qin Murim hired a local opera actor to pretend to be a healer in order to pressure the head of the Coles. The head of pension told the guy to listen here. They had all of China on alert to find Murim. At the moment, this young man is a potential contender for the heir's seat. If it were his will, right now he would crush them all into small pieces. But in this situation, the opinion of the victim is important. Murim at this time said that he was sorry that he, as the heir, had let himself be beaten up by a gang of wicked ways, thus tarnishing the reputation of the demonic forest. Rumors of what happened have already spread throughout Chongqing. He doesn't know how to go on living, he just wants to go to the next world. Muban was very scared at this point and was telling the gentleman that he was asking him not to do this. It was his fault. He realizes he can't do anything to comfort them, but at least let him pay for their treatment. The head asked, is he making fun of him now in terms of money? Muban started waving his hands and told the gentleman that it was not so. In that case, let him name any wish. He will do whatever he asks. The head immediately thought that the heir would have given the great blade a reason to intervene if he had the power. He understands, but he has no warrior pride at all. Murim was telling the guy at this time to give him the tavern. The guy asked, is he asking for Kanha's tavern? Of course he would give it to him. Muban realized that he was on the plus side. He crippled the heir and sold the joint for cheap. The amount he brought in for treatment would be more. And he managed to get out of such a stupid situation. Murim told the man to leave some money for treatment as well. Muban asked in surprise, one tavern is not enough? Murim began to pretend again and said he thought it was better to kill himself. Muban said that he would leave. Let him not die. Murim realized that, unfortunately, the anger of the head of the House of Thesarum was not extinguished. But the leader of the Coles gang had managed to get away alive, giving up the money and the tavern. The head came to the guy and said he could have been disabled. What the hell was he doing in a pub in the middle of the night? Murim replied that he wanted to have 1-2 drinks. About the handicapped man, it's all an act. Don't let him worry. The head said he'd ask something then. Bringing back Giona's tavern was the mission the head of Murim gave. Hassan tried to say that everything was right. But Murim interrupted him and answered the gentleman that it was not so, and his assignment was to change his mind about himself. The head agreed and asked the head of Murim what he would say. Hassan said that it was difficult for him to understand the master's methods. However, since it was necessary to change his opinion of himself, he successfully completed the task. He congratulates the boy, but suddenly stepping outside, the old man asked the gentleman to wait. Murim asked him what was needed. The old man tried to say something, but he started mumbling. The old man tried to say something, but he started mumbling. And then Murim got angry and told him not to pull the cat by the balls. Let him say it faster. The head asked the guy, did he set aside his pride just to pass the exam? Murim asked what was so important about this country pride. The head replied that pride is crucial to survival in Murim. Murim told him to wind his mind. When one wants to achieve something, sometimes one has to wallow in shit. He thinks that if they, unable to even squeeze the scum back into the inn, they put their pride forward, someone will thank them for it. Murim told the old man to wake up, and to think better of the real enemy that sits right under his nose. He means the great blade. The head realized that he understood what the guy was asking, to put pride aside. But why go down such a difficult path? A lot of people don't take him seriously. And what normal warrior would follow someone who's been a punching bag for a gang of thugs? And he would have to work hard to increase the heir's support. Hogan came over and said that the weather was nice outside. But the head replied that he should get out of his sight. Chinching late at night, there were a lot of people gathered in front of the pub. And everyone was thanking Mr. Henham for the wonderful dinner. And he had done a great job. Henham told them to stop sucking up. The man handed him the bottle and asked if they could all have a sip afterwards. Henham replied that he wouldn't give anyone anything. What is this world coming to? The clan of the Wicked Way is already trading. The man told Henham that the Great Blade clan didn't pick on such things. Henham replied that he was right. And they just do other people's errands and daintily drink. With a cover like that, no one will dig them up. And if they do, they'll end up dead. But suddenly a guy came running in and shouted to Henham saying they were in trouble. Something like this has happened. He has no idea. He's been running for so long that his throat is tearing up. The guy immediately took a drink and asked if he could have a drink. Everyone was surprised that he allowed himself to do that. The man told the guy that Henham's sweat and blood got that alcohol on a shopping trip. The guy replied that he was apologizing and didn't know. The man asked in surprise, he didn't know? What does he know? If it were up to him, I'd cut his pig belly open and get his drink back. Henham immediately grabbed the man's head and slammed it into the table, telling him not to dare interrupt him again. The lad was greatly surprised and thought, why is Henham so tall? He told the lad that if he was making a big deal out of it, Let him know that today was the day of his wake. Guy asked Henim if he remembered Cho Iron from the demon forest. Henim asked, Cho Iron? The one that disappeared about 30 years ago. The guy replied, that's right. Hyungnim said that he still remembered. She was Joe Pension's daughter. She is a capable girl who was called an incomparable beauty. If she hadn't died so early because of the heavenly Een, Sichuan would have been completely different. Heavenly Een is a feature of the body in which innate Een energy favors rapid progress in the study of sciences and martial arts. However, its disadvantage is that the body gradually deteriorates in the process of use due to the fact that the vessels are strongly influenced by Een energy. The guy told Henim that's right. So her son showed up in the demon forest. Henim asked, is he messing with him? Is he saying she gave birth to a baby boy with a disease? The guy replied that it was true. The demonic forest is in full turmoil right now, although he doesn't understand what the point of an heir is anymore. Henim grabbed him by the neck and asked him if he knew martial arts. The guy apologized and replied that he didn't know, but suddenly the guy started yelling at Henim and asking why he's taking the gun. He doesn't know anything else. He came running here as soon as he heard the news. Henim told him not to be afraid and called him another asshole. The guy asked him where he was going. Henim held nothing back and replied that the Great Blade Clan was the one to go to. The liquor stays with them. Henim realized that right now, the Ronins had the backing of the powerful Great Blade Clan. Because the demon forest had no heir, they all considered the Great Blade to be the master of the province. Cho Iron's offspring showed up out of nowhere. If the kid inherited his mother's talent and learned martial arts, he had definitely become a true master by now. Then how could he have been beaten by the Coles? There's something wrong. The current head of the demonic forest came to the council and said that a lot of things had happened during his absence. They passed the news on the way home. How are you feeling, Murup? The boy said he was fine, and he apologizes for the trouble he's caused. And then the old man said it was his mistake. He would take the punishment. Muron replied that he was not going to punish anyone, as he realizes it was the head of Narim who ultimately prevailed. Had they found a suitable place for Murup? Hogan answered that yes. What about Paisan's temple? Paisan immediately replied no. His temple is not suitable for an heir. Hogan stood his ground and told him to listen. Paisan stood his ground and replied that he would not listen to anything. There were no seats. Hogan asked, then what about Main's department? He immediately said no and asked for understanding. He immediately asked Wangma. They immediately told him to consider other options. Mugon thought that no one wanted to take Murup in because he had been beaten up by a gang of thieves. Suddenly, head Wiram said he had an idea. Mugon told the head of Wiram to speak up. Where could Murup be sent? Hassan replied that, is it possible to create a separate institution for the heir? Mugon replied that you could do a Northwest Bureau, for example. That is exactly the right place to do it. Hogang understood that the Northwest Bureau was in the past, when the demon forest held a commanding position in Sichuan province. Chongqing's business affairs were managed by the Chongqing office of the same name. However, after the power of the demon forest faded, only the Northeast Bureau remained. Hogan understood one thing, that the head of Wiram wanted to throw the helpless heir out to the northwest. Where are the forces of many clans stationed? Mugon asked if they still had a trading post that way. Hassan replied that yes, the Kanha Tavern, which the heir had returned. Hogan asked the head of Wiram, is he out of his mind? Is he still trying to mess with the heir? Hassan asked the old man, does he take a child of 5 years old him? Hogan asked, then what's his problem? The heir almost lost his life because of his wild exam. Hassan replied that he recognizes his assignment was wrong. He did not expect the heir to actually take any action, but the outcome was different. He saw great potential in the heir. In his opinion, he would be suited for a place he could run on his own. He believes he was born with this gift. Since even for them the heir is unpredictable, it's all the more so for the others. If they erect the Northwest Bureau, he will allocate his warriors to the heir. Hogan asked the head of Wiram why. Hassan told him to shut up. He wanted it that way. Murup saw that the head of Wiram, it turns out, wasn't exactly a nerd. Mugon asked head Wiram if he remembered the hidden meaning behind the erection of the Northwest Bureau. Hassan replied that yes, it was a direct challenge to the clan of the Great Blade. The Great Blade has many warriors, but the number of masters they have is about the same. The demonic forest can regain its former influence by monopolizing the Northwest. The Great Blade is hitting their capital harder and harder every day. We can face reality. He firmly believed that the heir could be entrusted with the future of the demonic forest. Hogang thought, is he not joking? The head asked what Murim thought. The guy thought about it and realized that everyone wanted him to refuse, because he couldn't pull off such a job. It's enough for them to be embarrassed. There is no need to make unnecessary noise. Murim asked the gentleman if he could say it again, or else he couldn't hear well because of the heads of Wanma and main departments asking him to give up something there. Hassan said that their Murim is really unpredictable. The Northwest Bureau is in charge of entrepreneurship in Chongqing. Murim said the problem is that the clans there are allied with the Great Blade. If they provoke them, the Great Blade will intervene 100%. Mugan said exactly that. The combat strength of the Great Blade greatly outnumbered them. But if some of the smaller clans of the Northwest subjugate themselves, the numerical imbalance will be reduced to some extent. He realized that despite their numerical superiority, the Great Blade clan was also pressing the economy of the demonic forest to subdue them on all fronts. Even if Murim fails, it's not a fact that a war will break out. Suddenly, Murim said that he agrees. However, he doesn't need the labor force. Hassan stood up and told the gentleman that the complexity of running a trading bureau was fundamentally different from his task of taking over the tavern. He would give him a guard who would accompany him everywhere and at all times. Mugan said that is correct. The work is extremely important and wide-ranging. Let him follow the advice of Chief Wareham. Murim asked, would anyone follow him? He doesn't need warriors. Mugan told him that he is as stubborn as iron. Hogan too replied to the Lord that he agrees with him. Murim said he would go last, and no one seems to trust him. But there's nothing to worry about. They'll meet here again after he takes over the Northwest. Henim went to the chief and asked if they thought it was suspicious. The chief replied. Henim asked him what he meant. The chief replied that the lad had returned the tavern without once using a weapon, so that they had no reason to interfere. It is not often in Murim, where everyone likes to show off their pride, that you meet someone who has a practical purpose. Moreover, he is his age and heir. Amazing, they had never seen each other yet, and he already felt a connection between them. Heir to the Great Blade. Sichuan's sacred sword Chong Wagi said bluntly that he wished to meet Qin Murim. At the moment of sending, Murim suddenly felt something and asked, is it Jin Huan who came? The guy replied that he did. Hiseo Jin Huan, the head of the secret unit, greets his lord. Murim told him that he'd told him not to come. Did he forget they were watching them? Jin Huan said that it was his fault, but they couldn't let him go alone. He asks, letting him at least follow him. Murim replied that he was as stubborn as a donkey. He asked Jin Huan, where are his subordinates? Jin Huan replied that they were waiting outside the walls of the fortress so that they could spring into action at any moment. Murim asked, is living on the street really living? Let him prepare overnight accommodation for everyone. Jin Huan replied that they might be exposed. Murim asked if he thought they would come this far. Jin Huan replied that he was obeying orders. And by the way, the Lord is his height. But Murim answered him that he was ceasing to grow slowly already. Now, among the top 10 masters in the world, he has almost no competitors. And when the growth process is over, the inner energy that his teacher sealed will return to him. And by the way, since he's here, he's willing to give him a job. Will he obey that order? Jin Huan replied that the Lord would only give orders. Things were moving quickly in the Northwest. Thanks to the financial help of the heads of Narim and Wirim, the inn, which had been empty since the departure of Cole's gang, had seen new life. The same guys said they welcome the heir. They are ready to serve him, the heir. He is Puget's cook. And the other one's name is Adon the peddler. The Northeast also provided a good labor force by entering the Northwest's position. Sakin said hello and said that he had been walking around all day and now he was starving. Let them boil something they are most sure of. The cook said he would have everything ready right away. Murim realized that with gorillas like that, the tavern would not be cleaned out. Deha asked the gentleman if he could inquire about what he was reading. Murim replied that he was reading a book that summarized the situation in the Northwest. Kolsa gang, military officials, Sog clan, Sakin clan, Childo clan, Mukwa gang. What a lot of shit has already gathered here. Deha replied that the Kholsa gang and the Mukwa gang were only here to maintain trade. Others make money by transporting various cargo or transporting people. Murup replied that it says something about coals, and suddenly the cook brought the food and told Murup that it was interesting. The leaders of Kholsa and Mukwa are at odds with each other. Why does he think that is? Deha replied that these gangs are similar in that they work for the Great Blade clan. One could think of the Kols and Mua as rivals, as they definitely need to prove their abilities in order to continue to work with the Great Blade. Murup said that's right, and he told Deka that he would have to be an errand boy for a while. At this time in Chongqing, northwest, the clan of the Wicked Way, the Kols gang was sitting in a tavern and they said that it was bankrupt. It was the leader of the Kholsa gang. But suddenly a servant came and told the lord that a guest from the demonic forest had arrived. Muban asked, "From the demon forest? Do those freaks want anything else?" The servant replied to the master that no. The guest came with a gift. Muban said that was the place to start, and let them see what the gift is. Let him come in. And then Deha came in and told the gentleman that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Muban was surprised and asked, "Sponger? And what does he want?" Deha replied that he was here on the heir's orders. He told him to give him a gift. The servant immediately grabbed the gift from his hands. Deha said it was fried cakes, a gift in honor of the opening of the Kanha tavern. Muban asked, "Is this brat being ordered over him? He ruined his whole life with his old tavern. He don't give a shit about those buns. Let him spill what he's really here for." Deha replied that that was the end of it. He would stop by again tomorrow. Muban asked, "Seriously? Did he really hand over the tortillas and leave?" The servant replied to the master that everything was correct. Muban told Tebin to follow him and report everything. Muban says he's yakking about coming back tomorrow. He's got a feeling he's a little off after these visits. Let him find out what's going on here and report back to him. Master of Surveillance and Local Cutie. His surveillance of Deha has been going on for days. After buying risky tortillas at the bazaar, he always goes to them. During this time, he realized one thing. He seems to like tortillas. Since he only buys them and nothing else, what flavor will he take today? Bean paste or honey? He likes the former better. Tabin came to the master and said that was the end of it. Muban got angry and replied that he had been stupidly eating buns all week. Tabin said his words hurt him. He actually got the information. Rumors began to spread among the people that they were on friendly terms with the demonic forest. Muban asked, "What the hell is that? Why the hell are they their buddies?" Tebin replied that the man in red gave them tortillas every day. Looks like the Mua gang found out about it and started a rumor that they had befriended a demonic forest. Muban got very angry and told him to say that in another 100 years, and Chin Murup would be a dead man. Deka asked the gentleman, "Should we carry rice cakes today too?" Murup replied that no, he may not go anymore. 100% people have already started chattering something like, "A bunch of scum threw the Great Blade and sucked up to the demonic forest. The Mukwa gang is already messing with their heads, and now they're messing with theirs. In this state, the Kols won't be able to use the head properly. And yes, the unloved leader is delayed." Just then Muban entered with his foot shouting. Murup told Puga and Adan to bring the guest a drink. "Where did he see a guest here?" Murup replied, "His face is so red. He'll probably fall off his feet soon. Let him sit down soon." Muban immediately slammed his foot down on the table and asked, "Does he know why he's here?" Murup asked to have a drink with him. Did he think he was a total sucker? Did he think he was fooling him? And this time it's different. He'll finally start to fear him. Murup asked him, in other words, will they not talk? Muban replied, no. The master asked, and drink too? Muban replied that he would rather beat his head in with a bottle. Murup laughed and said he was unshakable. Well, then there's nothing to be done, and the work day is over. And he told Deha to close all the windows, and let Puget and Adan wait for him in the kitchen. Muban asked him if he was showing off again. Has he forgotten how he got beat up last time? Murup replied that, to the one who takes shit behind the Great Blade, he advises him to shut up. Muban asked, is he bailing? Murup replied that he wanted to get away from a lot of things. Sure, but not today. Deha thought at that moment, is he in his right mind? Murup said that since ancient times it has been believed that a person's character is formed by his manners. If a guest has a request, he simply cannot refuse it. Muban thought it was some kind of performance and told him to attack. He'll be crippled this time for sure. Murim immediately came up to him with speed and taking him by the jaw said that a man should give back as much as he was given. Deha was surprised at the fact that he didn't even see the heir's movements. Murim was telling Muban not to ping him. If anyone from the street heard him, he'd kill the entire Cole's gang. Northwest, this place has been divided between the wicked clan that cooperates with the Great Blade. These lands are considered wilderness as they are in the territory of the wicked clan. Gangs naturally interact with each other. This is because the unholy clan of Sichuan is unconventional in itself. To earn the patronage of the Great Blade, one must prove their prowess. But as paradoxical as it may sound, if the organization has no power, it will eventually be destroyed. There is one who survived not only through strength but also through resourcefulness. The second strongest of the Cole's gang is Yuk Muban. The scariest person here is only Bon Lim of the Great Blade. But even so, he is so strong that people like Mubong could be counted on one's fingers in Chongqing. But how could this happen to him? They mean he can't even counterattack. Deha realized that despite wielding such power, he had been hiding it. And now it was humiliation. But Murim did not pity him much, and began to beat him in a way he had never even seen in his life. Muban turned out to be very weak and could not resist against him. Murim said he told him clearly, if he peeps one more time, he will destroy all his sixes. Muban froze at this point and didn't think this attack had any power. Even though he wasn't dragged in much, he felt as if he was about to fall back. Though it's hard to believe, his skills are vastly superior. First we must capitulate and put the blade on notice. Murim said to Deha to keep an eye on this dumbass. The guy was surprised and asked, keep an eye on him? And where is the gentleman going? Murim replied that he was going to Cole's gang. And since Muban did not take his words seriously, today he would destroy Cole's gang. Muban was greatly surprised and realized that he had to do something to save himself. And this gentleman speaks in all seriousness. Muban told the master that he had lost. May he spare the Cole's gang. Deha told the master that he could be heard even in the tavern. Let him not be angry. Murim said this idiot has good luck. And yes, he will spare the Cole's gang. Muban replied that he thanked the master, and he's overly grateful. And their leader is a real man, and he cries like a woman. And if he's so grateful, let him buy him a drink. Murim shouted to Puga and Adan to bring the highest quality alcohol and appetizers. And the ringleader Yuk obliged. Murim saw the table and was surprised and said that there was a lot of stuff there. Let them sit down and eat too. Muban asked the master if he could. Murim waved his hand and said he had something to chat with him about. When else would they be so happy? Let them sit down and don't spoil his mood. Murim said at the table that he was glad they were all gathered around the same table. Before we get down to business, let him say something. And as they can all see, he had a reason to hide his powers. He's talking about the demonic forest. So he wants what happened here today to stay between them. The leader of the Yuk came to the tavern to have a drink with him. And would Muban be able to keep his promise? The boy replied that he would keep his mouth shut, and suggested that they should have fun now, or is there something that is bothering them? Deha asked the gentleman, is he a villain? Murim said how dare such a dog call him a villain, and suddenly ordered the Mobin ringleader to fall down. Mobin immediately heeded the order, and fell to the floor. Murim asked Dake what he now thought he was. Deha replied that the Lord is the real evil himself. Murim said that he would then ask the ringleader Mobin. Let him answer whether he is evil or not. Muban realized in his head that this guy was just stinking dung. A greasy air. In a word, shit. But Muban thought about it and said he wasn't a villain. After all, he had spared him in the end, hadn't he? Murim answered the ringleader that it was right. Let him sit down in his place. He told Deha that martial arts is a tool of killing, warriors are a tool of killing. The martial arts world is full of such dangerous guys. It's silly to argue about good and evil. And speaking of peace, there are people who spend their whole lives in hiding because they have the same roots as those who are going to kill them. Stalked by a martial arts master in the forest when there is pitch darkness all around. Have they ever seen a sharp dagger fly past them? And how a child's eyes flutter open at that moment. For him, martial arts is about survival. If he dies, there is little use for good and evil. Deha thought, what kind of life did the Lord live before? Deha tells the Lord that he obeys him. And seeing their leader Yuk nodding, he knew but he knew something, and offered to laugh and have fun. Muban laughed and told the Lord that everything would be fulfilled. And this is what he lives for. A mercenary was sitting on the rooftop, wondering what they were chatting about so cheerfully. Had the Coles gang really been captured by the demonic forest? And no matter which way he looked at it, choosing a demonic forest over an influential great blade was just crazy. The heir to the demon forest and the head of the Coles gang have formed an alliance. We need to report it quickly. But suddenly Deha asked the gentleman where he was looking. Murup replied that he thought there was a rat on the roof. It must have escaped because of the laughter of the leader of the Yuk. Murup asked the dog where he learned to drink like that, like a bottomless barrel. Muban replied that he was also one of the best drinking masters in the Wicked clan. Murup asked if he could invite the Northwest Alliance and have a shot too. Muban was surprised and asked the gentleman. Murup replied that he had done some research and found out about the Northwest Alliance. He wanted to know more about them. Muban said they meet once a month with the 6 ringleaders of the Northwest Alliance and have a drink. Their Kolsa gang leader is one of them. Muban asked when is the next meeting? Murup replied that they met 10 days ago, so there is still time, and in a little while there will be a Northwest Alliance meeting. And have him call him next time too. Muban replied to the gentleman that he would be let know. If there is no special business, they meet at certain intervals. It may be a long time before the next meeting. Murup said that's fine, but this is a special case. Something special is about to happen. But suddenly the stranger was saying what a bad hobby. Until when would he pursue it? The stranger asked. Head of the Silver Oblivion So Jinhuan and said the 4th head of the Northwest Quan Hek Bai. If they captured him, there will be 2 left. Let him just follow him. His master ordered him to tie him up. If the boy keeps quiet, he'll untie him. The old man said he kidnapped the other squad leaders as expected. There's no trace, so it's not a gang thing. He expected a skilled craftsman to handle it, because he's not gonna wait his turn either. He specifically splurged and hired guards, and let the 2-headed sword masters come out. It was said that the 2 brothers' technique was almost like a divine sword. Chu brought their heads and asked, "Are these the 2-headed bastards?" He doesn't know about the masters, but he's made cripples out of them. The vice principal was late. He kicked them so hard, they knocked their teeth out. The old man said it couldn't be. Defeat the best swordsman of Sichuan. Chu told him to shut his mouth. If he didn't want to share their fate with them, then let him shut his mitt and silently follow him. The vice principal swung his sword at him, asking how dare he speak with a great blade like that. Chu wasn't even frightened and easily repelled his attack and retaliated with several powerful blows that the old man's teeth even flew out. He told his man to take it easy. Chu replied to the head that no, he didn't understand. Whether it's the great blade or someone else, why can't they just destroy them? Looking at his technique, it looks like he's not capable of anything at all. He told him to stop because their god had his own plans. And like he said, he can handle it on his own. He'll do the rest, and he'll help their god. He hasn't forgotten how to address a god, has he? Chu replied that yes, he was not an outlaw, but a ronin, willing to lay down his life for a god. The guy's not a god, he's an heir. And yes, their heir has succeeded. He's so big, their heir. He's gonna go to meet him. He turned to Chu and told him not to balk so widely. Of course, if he could. Chu came with the news to the master. Murup was surprised and said how tired he was of this man. Chu started laughing and said that he hadn't seen the master in a long time. Murup replied to Chu that he was curious about something. Why, out of all the guys, was he the one who showed up? Chu replied that no one knew him in Sichuan. That's why he was ordered to come here should he come back? Murup replied that no, he had already been told by Jin Huan. Hadn't he? Not to call him God, but to call him master. Chu told the Lord that he understood. Well, who else needs to be killed? Murup replied that there was no one yet. Don't even take a step without his permission. Chu was greatly surprised and did not even understand how it was possible. Chu said that if the Chokshal bastards are still gone, then why did he call him? Murup replied that he didn't call him. He said to call anyone, and he was the one who showed up. Chu said that's apparently how it is. Murup was very surprised and replied that he was going to go nuts. The Lord told him that the boys from Chokshal would be here soon, so he should save his strength for now. Chu replied that he understood. Murim opened the door and told his boys to come in. Deha asked the gentleman if everything was okay. What the hell is this? Murim replied that it was Rongnin from Shangxi, who had an indirect relation to him. He has one thing to do with them, so he called him. Deha said that it's clear. A man from the Coles gang has just arrived. But suddenly a guy came running in and told the gentleman that he welcomed him, and started saying that the Northwest Alliance was calling for a concilium. Murim was greatly relieved after these words and told Chu to get ready. The Chokshil dogs would come soon. Northwest and Chong'an Fortress. This place is run by one of the 6 gangs of the Northwest Alliance, the most powerful Saka gang. In this tavern they meet once a month and negotiate. Although the schedule was not kept, the meetings were always held. But what is the Lord up to? Mobin thought. Mobin told his men to wait outside. He knew it was very difficult to get an audience with these people because of the rumors about the demonic forest. And apparently he's on their bad side. Damn it. And he felt bad about that Mua gang leader too. Muban told them to open the doors to him immediately. He realized that if he was branded a traitor, he would destroy them all. There was a gathering of the unholy clan of the Northwest Alliance in the Northwest, and Muban said that apparently he was the last to arrive and everyone had already gathered. The head of the Mua gang, Chu Kwangdu, said that Mubong turned out to be a fat-skinned man. Shouldn't he be licking the demon forest's ass? Muban replied that yes. There was a rat who was spreading rumors and shaking the air aimlessly. He would surely find that rat and strangle him. The others were greatly surprised and thought to themselves just to give this prick a try. As the opportunity presents itself, he'll be the first. Suka gang leader Suk Kyum Young says if they want to have fun, let them do it outside. He doesn't want to see them destroy his tavern. He'll think about the problem of Chief Yuka. And it's time for the meeting to start already. Muban thought he would breathe a sigh of relief to start. The man told Master Suk that they had gathered earlier than the scheduled date. Why was there such a rush that he summoned all the leaders of the Northwest Alliance? Suk replied that this morning he had noticed the soldiers of the Great Blade scurrying about the street like cockroaches. He immediately rushed to the Great Blade to find out what was wrong. 6 leaders of the Great Blade were missing. Muban knew immediately that something special was about to happen. Mobin was very surprised and showed himself to be in bad taste, but said he was just too surprised. When he said that something special was going to happen, he meant it. The leaders of the Supreme Blade aren't mere teddies at all. What is the real personality of this heir? His heart is about to become. He asked, is it some bastard from the demonic forest? But suddenly one of them said that he didn't think so. Due to the appearance of the new heir, the Great Blade carefully watched the demonic forest. There were no suspicious movements from them. If we talk about the ringleaders of the Great Blade, they are definitely not easy opponents. And in the demonic forest, where there isn't even a normal army, this risk is unnecessary. The second man said that the knife behind his sinus was much scarier than the knife being waved in front of him. If it's not a demonic forest, is there someone more dangerous? Sok replied that's why he'd gathered them here. He thinks they should help in the search. The man said that's the problem with the Great Blade. But suddenly someone outside turned to the foreman. Mobin asked what was the matter. He was answered at once that he should take refuge in a safe place. An unknown intruder had broken in and wiped out their warriors. The Lord asked with surprise, and then Chu opened the doors and said how he can't stand the bad guys. If a man speaks, you have to listen carefully. And they all deserve to be punished. And then Murim pushed him and said that he couldn't see anything and let him move a bit. Showing his face, he said how unfortunate is it. They started without waiting for the protagonist. And then one of them stood up and asked fearfully, heir to the demonic forest? And said, Muban is in league with the demonic forest after all. Muban said no. First of all, the heir is also doing his part for Northwestern. Murim saw that their leader, Yuk, would do a very good job. Now, if he wants to live, he can put his ass on the chair and not move. Murim told Chu to deal with the blind man or the guy standing on his own 2 feet first. But let him not touch their faces. Chu replied that he understood. He would deal with them immediately. But the man couldn't help himself and pulled out his sword and said, how dare such a filthy little brat come here and pollute the air of the Northwest Alliance? He is the leader of the 7 Swords gang. Du Yong gang, he will put him in his place. But Chu didn't hold back after saying such loud words, and with one punch, He smacked him in the head that Gon's teeth even flew off. Chu looked at them and told them to attack. They all came at him at once to kill him. Muban asked the heir, "Does he intend to muzzle them all?" Murup replied that he would if he had to. He only wanted to get rid of one person. It's certainly to his advantage to keep Master Sokka alive. He is resourceful and his cauldron cooks as well. Chu asked, "Then who should he kill?" Murup replied, "The head of the Mua gang, Chu Kwandu. That bastard is a coward. He's a vicious loan shark. So if they kill him, they'll enlist the support of the people. Of course, the head of the Mua Chu Guandu gang. Gang leader Mua Chu Guandu." Murup tells Chu to take down the ugliest one. Let him pick the guy who looks like a villain and does usury. Chu immediately obeyed the heir and started to kill the ugliest one. He stopped and asked the heir he was referring to that monkey, right? No matter how you look at it, that guy is the ugliest. A man came at him from behind and told him to die. And suddenly Chu turned around and said they'd start with him. He immediately turned around and cut him into small pieces with his huge sword, not even leaving him alive. Deha watched this with his mouth open and was surprised to say that he felled the head of the Mua gang with a single blow. Is there really such a master among the Shangshi Ronin? Murup told Deha to guard the corridor, whether friend or foe. If anyone dares to enter, let him slit his throat. Deha immediately replied to the master that he would do anything. Murup said that if he had studied the surroundings, he could sit down. Since there was no chair, he would confine himself to the windowsill. And he suggested that a full northwestern concilium should begin. Sak turned to the demonic forest heir and asked, did he think he could get away with it after such a commotion? Although his grandfather is a great man, but this is a serious incident, apparently unaware that they were being supported by the Great Blade himself. The man who came with them is a true master. Let him not be so presumptuous, hiding behind the backs of the Ronin and his great-grandfather. Murup started laughing and said that he was no better. He smelled arrogance from a mile away, and he was only the sixth man of a great blade. The heir told Deha to go inside. He turned to Chu and the guy that they would take turns. Have them block the stairs, and they can cut everyone off. The warriors ran towards them, and the captain told them to beware of this Ronin. Let them find the master and save him. The warriors asked, surprised to see him? But the mercenary walked over and greeted them. Murup asked the others if they could hear how his subordinates were dying. Sak turned to the heir and said how dare he treat them like that and yet be so calm. But then Deha stepped in and punched him right off his elbow. Murup was surprised and told the guy that his energy was surging. What's wrong with him? Deha replied that he told him that martial arts is about survival. Murup said that is correct. Mercy can return in the form of a dagger. If it has appeared, let it not be allowed to grow further again. And until the poison begins to drain from his eyes. Sak asked him what his goal was. Murup told him that he was proving to be a badass. And that old man needs to be killed too. And then Deha started killing everyone over and over again. Sak told the heir to stop. Suddenly the warriors outside were telling them to find the head, and not to let their guard down, their enemy is too strong. Did the second platoon come up? What loyal servants he had. But Sak shouted at them not to come in. Chu at this time was telling the head of Sokka that he would give him a chance. If he wants to tear him up, Murup said one of them is an insect of the demon forest. The other is still under his grandfather's wing. But since they would only have to deal with one monster like Ronin, wouldn't this fight be worth it? Muban immediately upon seeing such a face realized that it was an inexplicable feeling of fear. He never thought that there would come a day in his life when he would look at them with pity. Murup told the Yuk leader that the head of the Mukwa gang is dead. He can go and take over his territory. It is his now. Muban was surprised and asked, can he really do that? Murup replied that, however, all the property that had been taken by the moneylenders should be returned. Let him release the abducted women by paying their traveling expenses. Would he be able to do this? Muban replied that of course. Let him grant it to him. Murup saw that he was bold and acted without hesitation. He shows no mercy to those whom he considers his enemies. Sometimes he seems like the worst villain in the world, but he has his own rules for survival. The same goes for a Ronin named Unchu. He has no hesitation whatsoever. As far as he knew, There was no warrior among the Ronin of the entire world who displayed such incredible strength, except for Hexacalang. Murim asked the guy if he liked this kind of thing. Muban replied that yes. This is clearly a technique that this suspicious heir brought with him. But on the other hand, even though he had decided to follow this guy, he wasn't worried one bit. And today he'd made sure of it. In a moment all bowed and told the heir that they would obey him. Let their men be spared. Deha and saw that, as far as this man was concerned, he would definitely regain the lost dominance of the demonic forest. Murim tells Deha to go and get Chu. If they don't stop him, there will be nothing left of Sokka's gang. Suddenly, Chu replied to his mentor that he had heard everything. Murim addressed the people here to listen to him carefully. From today they sever all ties with the Great Blade. Sak and his men replied to the mentor that everything would be as he asked. Murim asked how much they were giving to the Great Blade. Sak replied, 5% of the business profits. Murim was surprised and asked, 5%? What is left over there? Sak responded that this is a deficit. The remaining amount is covered by commercial organizations or other ways. Murim realized that to survive in Chongqing, one must hold tightly to the Great Blade. If you raise funds from other sources to cover the business deficit. He told his men to forget about training masters or increasing their power. The Great Blade is just a bunch of thieves skillfully maintaining power. Sak asked the heir he had seen the Yuk ringleader, hadn't he? He's different from him. He has no intention of taking over their business. Murim replied to have them operate as they had previously, but to direct a portion of the 1% profit to the demonic forest. Sak asked the heir, 1%? Murim asked with surprise, they don't have enough? Can he raise it to 2? Sak replied that 1%, but even then the risk is high. Murim asked, so the head of Sokka refuses? The heir thought about it and said that they would limit it to 1%. In return, the Northwest Alliance should actively participate in the activities of the Demon Forest. If they leave the Great Blade behind, they will necessarily be overtaken by a crisis. If the Great Blade pursues them, it will be dealt with. Instead of living like fish and paying 5% interest all your life, wouldn't it be better to realize your dreams by gradually expanding your holdings? The ringleaders asked, would they really have such a chance? Just then, Murim thought and replied that he was giving his head for sure. They immediately headed over and thought, aren't these the heads of the Northwest Alliance? And there's a strange atmosphere in the air. I wonder if the mentor did his part. Mugan said that he didn't expect to see them here. Sak replied that they didn't think this day would come either. After all, the Northwest Alliance and the demonic forest are not on friendly terms. Nevertheless, they thank you for accepting them. Mugan said okay and asked why they were here. Sak replied that they are the heads of the Northwest gangs, would like to make a truce with the demon forest from this day forward, and hoped for their favor. The heads asked them, are they mocking them now? Are they not part of the Great Blade? Suddenly Murim came in and replied, what jokes? Why were they so upsetting to the people he had gone to such trouble to find? And introduced himself as Chin Murim of the Demon Forest, greeting the ruler of Lim. Mugan told him to come through. He had wanted to see him for a long time. Let him explain what happened. Murim immediately suggested that they had better talk about the benefits they could gain by joining together and the future they could comprehend. He asked them politely. Sak thought that if that was politeness as he understood it, did that mean that bandits and pirates were still angels? Murim said that they promised to return some of the profits and actively cooperate with the Demon Forest to keep the business going. Mugan asked, are the heir's words true? Sak immediately let out a tear and replied that unconditionally. The others were thinking at this moment, what trick did the heir use this time? The head of the Coles gang also came at the heir's initiative. Would he really learn the apostles' technique without their knowledge? Hassan decided that he would take a look at these aristocrats. His eyes don't lie. Hogan thought it was a valid tactic anyway. How did he tame these people? Hassan thought that lousy Deha must know. He can see the mutilation on his face. What on earth had the heir done? But Deha saw his menacing look and knew immediately that he was up to something. And perhaps he had politely persuaded them. In Kanha Tavern, Sak said that this was how the Northwest Alliance entered into an alliance with the demonic forest. And the borders of Chongqing had undergone significant changes. Considering that the demon forest is located in the northern part and the Great Blade in the southern part, Chongqing is currently divided into north and south. However, the Great Blade will not strike at once. until they find the gang leaders and hunt down the infiltrators. The Great Blade will not start a war. Murim replied that it was possible. He thought that in 10 days everything would be back to normal. He asked the Yuk leader if he had dealt with the Mukwa gang. Yuk answered the gentleman that yes. Only one guy named Buban was adamant, while the others bowed their heads. And that was easy. After all, this is the power of the wicked clan. Murim asked the lad what would become of the Coles gang if the leader Yuk dropped out. Muban was surprised and asked the heir out of fear why he asked such a thing so suddenly. Murim replied that if the man they serve dies and his subordinates don't have the slightest desire for revenge. Isn't that frustrating? And then the guy told Muban that the heir wants to tell him not to treat his subordinates like the deceased Chu Kwangdu. Muban replied that he is not like Chu Kwangdu. Murim told the guy he'd keep an eye on him. How are things going with the Great Blade? Sak replied that they seemed to be focusing on solving the case of the disappearing ringleaders and had left Chongqing to the Ronins. Isn't the southern part of Chongqing empty? Sak replied that the Ronins of Chongqing are special. It is hard to say that these parts are empty as they also belong to the Great Blade. Among the Ronin there is a great master called the Silent Salesman. He has trained many Ronin who have subsequently performed the most dangerous tasks of the Great Blade. They must not act yet, for they will be watched by the Great Blade himself. Murim said they would protect them from the Great Blade. They would take the responsibility, wouldn't they? As he watched, he noticed that Chongqing was on high ground. From today onwards, the better gang masters will observe from the heights. The guy told the heir that although Chongqing is at a height, it will be difficult to know the situation of each gang because they are separated by buildings. Murim thought and said that firing a signal flare was enough, everyone would understand. From today he left Yen Chu in Chongqing, but since he needs to rest too, he'll put extra guards on. But in most cases he can manage on his own. The boy replied that he was thanking the heir for such a chance. Murim said they should set up 3 sentries. In case of emergency, one would run to him and the other would report to the commander. Since communication with HQ is maintained by carrier pigeon, they will be able to request reinforcements quickly. When the flare is launched, Unchu will immediately come to their aid. If the flare is launched in 2 places at the same time, he will send an even more ferocious guy with Unchu. Sak wondered if there was another monster. He wouldn't be able to accomplish everything with just one Ronin. If they hadn't surrendered that day, the Northwest Alliance would have come to an end. Murim said that in any case, while the Great Blade was busy with other business, it was a great chance for them. Let them not be afraid. The boys asked the heir. Murim asked, what? The guy asked, what if a signal flare is launched from 5 parts at the same time, what's in that case? The heir said they could hide or flee. The main thing is to hold out for about half an hour. Sak asked with surprise, half an hour? Murim replied that was correct. In that time he would burn all the Great Blade and come to save them. Murim thought and said that he would go then and let them stay and digest the information. Sak replied that was fine. They will tell their subordinates about their plan. The guy said that he would never understand this man. Sak also replied that he was supportive. But suddenly one of his men said that he had definitely realized 2 things. When war breaks out, they will not stand by and just watch. And the heir is someone they never want to turn into an enemy. The boys wondered what the fool was talking about. Sak asked the others, aren't they stuffy? And suggested they have a shot and go. The guy replied that the heir had said it would be safe for 10 days. Nothing would happen from a couple shots. And yes, why was he so sure about the 10 days? Sak replied that he thought the Great Blade had allotted that much time to look into the case. 5 leaders disappeared without a trace. He doesn't think this case will be solved quickly. The guy said that if you think about it, it all started at Kanha Tavern. Hedyuk doesn't think so. The boy replied that he had recently followed the heir. Muban caught up with the heir at that moment and asked him to wait. Murim asked, what's in it for him? Muban asked, is it the heir's doing? The heir asked, what's in it for him? Muban said he was talking about the ringleaders of the Great Blade. Murim laughed and replied, even if he is, so what? Will he run to report to the Great Blade? Muban asked, how could he? They wouldn't believe him anyway. Murim asked, then why is he wondering? Muban replied that he was the only one in the Northwest Alliance who had learned of the heir's true abilities. Murim told him to be proud of it. Muban replied that he was serious. As a warrior, he would like to know their power. The heir said that even saying this, he does not believe him. Muban told the heir that he always believes him. Murim answered him that since it was him, he would share the secret with the leader of the Yuk. Since the world is full of weirdos, he can't be certain. But among the people he knows, there are only 10 people who can fight him. They are 10 of the best masters in the world. Immediately they both started laughing non-stop. Muban calmed down and said with a sigh that he would be on his way. Murim said goodbye and told him to stop by sometimes. Murim was thinking at this moment, who would believe it? The teacher's measures to suppress the heavenly yin energy in his body energy seal. This technique seals certain inner forces until the body grows and the balance of yin and yang is achieved. And the day when the seal is broken will be the moment when physical growth stops. When that time comes, there will only be 2 people left who can fight him. And that is the divine dragon Dan Soren and the sword lord Chianan. Murim told his man that until that time let him do his best for him. The lad replied to the Lord that his task was done without witnesses. Murim said that thanks to him everything goes smoothly. And he asked, so where does he keep the ringleaders? Seo replied that they were imprisoned in a prison in the Kwanj cemetery on Mount Socho. It would be quite difficult to find the prison as it was far away deep in the forest. Murim said that after 24 hours let him release one each day. Seo replied that the order would be obeyed and asked if there were any other errands. Murim replied that he didn't. As he does everything, let him keep his head down. As long as the eyes and ears of the world are open, he can't go rogue. At least not until his power is at its peak. Seo said that the commander had sent him a letter. Murim asked Manhwa if he had learned something for him, the boy that Qin Murim saved in the past. He grew up and became the commander of the Sichuan army. He became the leader in charge of foreign relations on behalf of Qin Murim, the ruler of the world. Sichuan, which was once one of the bandit provinces, was able to reaffirm the status of its martial arts. Thanks to the skills of leader Su Manhwa, Murim realized that the Great Blade had a short history, numbering only about 10 years. This letter probably describes how he stormed in and captured Chongqing. And he's so fast. That's what Manhwa is all about. But suddenly he saw in the letter he had written that he didn't know. Murim was greatly surprised and turned to Seo. He told him to let him starve for a day. Seo replied that he would tell him everything. Deha late at night decided to practice. But suddenly he felt someone behind him and immediately launched a sword attack. But suddenly the heir abruptly stopped his attack, not even hesitating. Deha was greatly surprised to see his heir. Murim said it was strong. Who would have thought he would work so hard? And he's saying he's a born warrior? Deha asked the heir what he wanted to say by this sudden appearance. Murim replied that he had, after all, said he would follow him. For that he needs to show more. If he does not want to be marked, let him defend himself. Deha said while it's not a life and death struggle, he's always ready. Let the heir step up. Murim immediately began to launch devastating attacks at him. Deha was surprised at this, for he had forgotten who his opponent was. But though he is strong, he is not invincible. Deha decided to use his sword fury. Deza launched an attack and heard that he was the youngest ruler of the demonic forest. He could be described in one word, and whenever an opportunity presents itself, he does not hesitate to pursue his goal. His fighting skills are also top-notch. This sword suits a demonic forest that only pursues pure-blood demons. That's why the Great Blade didn't want to ally with him. Martial arts have been studied and developed over a long period of time. It's not a level where it's tinkered with by someone like a Great Blade that has existed for less than a decade. Dina calculated everything and made an attack from behind. But suddenly Murim turned around and replied that he knew he would do that. But Murim immediately dodged such a strong attack with ease. Deha was surprised and saw that his heir is crazy. Even though he knows it's not serious, he feels he has to kill him. Murim told him not to be afraid. When the muscles harden, involuntarily exerts extra force. Deha replied to the heir that he had almost overpowered him. Let him not ignore that fact. Murim told him to take it seriously. Every master in this world has their own special techniques and fortitude, and if he can't handle it, he'll lose his head faster than he can use his skills. That's the difference between an ordinary man and a master. Deha saw the sword in front of his nose and felt as if he had been tricked. Was the difference really that big? And all of his attacks were only repelled by one. He deliberately stayed at close range to distract his opponent, differing from the accounts of those around him. They say that the heir has only some self-defense skills. Murim said he never said that. Perhaps these conclusions were drawn from his tales of not having been trained by his mother in martial arts. Deha asked him to tell them what is their real identity. Murim replied, who knows? One of the top 10 masters of the world. Deha took it as a joke and started laughing loudly. He thought and why he was surrounded by such people. Murim said he felt this powerful force. He said he would take up farming, but he still would not give up. Deha replied that they had a long way to go. Murim told the kid to be a little more humble. And frankly he thought Deha was so good that it was hard to believe he was mediocre. And unlike his sophisticated swordsmanship, his decision-making ability on the battlefield is like the instincts of wild animals. Murim said that if he could use his powers, things would be much easier. But since he can't use his powers in real combat, he doesn't think he should go into the thick of it. Deha asked the heir why he thought so. Murim understood that they were concentrating all their efforts on solving the case of the disappearance of the ringleaders and leaving Chongqing to the Ronins. So there are no Ronins in the southern part now. And then Murim said loudly that this was it. Deha was surprised and asked what exactly. Murim said nothing and ordered the boy to grab his sword and follow him. There was something to check out. Deha asked, where are they going so suddenly? Let them wait for him. Deha became very tired and asked the heir where he was going. Can't he understand on his own on the way? Deha replied that no, he understands, that's why he is asking. Arriving at the area under the Sichuan Great Blade, Murim said that this part was guarded by the warriors of the Great Blade. Deha said that the locals here are different from ordinary people. They don't faint at the sight of a demonic forest heir. Murim asked, so what of it? Deha replied that he meant that he had chosen the wrong opponent to bluff. If it came to a scandal, they would not stand on ceremony. Murim said that since the northwest is on the side of the demonic forest, it would definitely be an eyesore. If anything happens, he will protect him. So let Deha fear nothing. Deha asked the heir what he was up to. They whispered and squinted at them. Deha realized at that moment, whatever the reason, he couldn't go back alone. What was he thinking about? Deha used her quiet voice and told the heir that someone was secretly watching them. And there are a shitload of those assholes. Murim shouted in his loud voice for the jerks in the alley to listen to him. Let them stop hiding like rats. Let them come out. He's the one who broke in, so why is the owner hiding? Deha started to panic and get very nervous. But Murim told him to stand still. There's one rat coming out. Murim counted all those who had gathered there and said that they were too many. And he said, who's in charge? And then a guy came out and said he was the leader of the Chongqing Ronins. Moog Inpi. Murim replied how quickly events were unfolding. He had come to see him. Inpi asked in surprise, had he come to see him? Murim replied that yes and said more accurately with all of them. He raised his hand to the sky and told them loudly that he wished to hire them. Inpi asked the heir if he had hit his head. Murim replied that he was in his right mind. Inpi asked that he was then apparently unaware of who was behind their backs. How on earth could he come here without knowing about it? He has no ties to the Great Blade. Inpi replied that he didn't care if he was related to the Great Blade or not. Okay, so what does the heir want them to do? Murim said, how abruptly. And his assignment to them is this murder. And he's only giving them 30 minutes. And if they pull it off, that money will be theirs. And have them kill Des in just 30 minutes. The boy was greatly surprised by this and asked what the heir was saying. Murim replied that if they lost that money, they were finished. Therefore, let him survive. Deha tells the heir that he is bringing him to the southern part without warning and tells him to survive. Doesn't he know about the history of his sword? Murim replied to the lad that this is why they came here. Here there are no subordinates or comrades he can maim. He can swing his sword as he pleases. The money allocated by the Lim ruler and the working capital of the Northwest is now in his hands. If they lose it, they're dead men. Deha thought about it and realized that losing the money meant he would die, and something was bound to happen to him. Inpi suddenly apologized for interrupting, but they had received an assignment from his heir for a colossal amount of money. Apparently, he didn't even give them a choice. He immediately ordered his men to camp the 4 ghosts. Murim saw with astonishment that the Ronins possessed the laws of the camp. Ronin, because of the individualism of the Ronin, there aren't many warriors with worthwhile skills. There are masters like the seventh scholar that's a unique case. It is said that Mug Yingpi among the Ronin of Sichuan is most like a dark scholar. This is an opponent that should not be underestimated. Murim saw that a Ronin with such amazing skills, when Ronins who live one day at a time and unite, basic skills they would be hard to defeat. Deha at this time was saying to himself to imagine he was on the edge of a cliff, and in a moment, everyone came at him at once. He thought that this was the end of him. Deha realized he was a fool to trust the air, but he swung his blade in a moment and shattered his enemy's weapon. Deha himself didn't realize how this happened, and suddenly he saw his sword begin to glisten, and he immediately dodged the next attack. He thought that he couldn't have foreseen such a thing. After injuring his comrades, he couldn't bat like he used to. Deha immediately realized that the sword had shown itself. Naturally, it wasn't this guy who was the problem. Apparently, he was the one who used Deha's sword incorrectly. Inip told his men to focus. Why are they playing with that insect? Have them surround him on all sides. Inpi said that blood has already been spilled. There was no point in asking for mercy now. Murim replied that it was not that. The boy asked with surprise, then what? Murim replied that he was risking his life too. He is going to die soon. Doesn't he have anything to say? Inpi didn't answer anything and started laughing. Murim immediately saw his creepy smile. He just can't understand it, he thought. This guy won't be able to handle a sword anymore. Seen this before. If his memory serves him correctly, it's the movements from the red Chetra demon sword technique. Deha felt at the moment of the attack that it was a special attack. It was probably because of this technique that he had reached such a high position. Deha immediately used the purpose of the fierce sword. Murim saw that the more he looked at this sword, the more virtuosic its movements became. This sword is becoming heavy, and when he defends himself with it, and becomes very light and fast when dodging enemy attacks. Murim was telling Deha at the moment of the battle that he was amazing, and yet he should look back sometimes. Suddenly, he immediately felt someone attacking him and easily dodged the spear attack. Inpi told him that he had had enough and called him an insect. Inpi said that those who were left alive would take care of the wounded and let them retreat. He would deal with him himself. He is Deha from the demon forest after all. Has he been misleading the whole world all this time? Deha asked him, what is he talking about? Inpi replied that he was talking about the rumors about him not being able to fight. Deha said that he can't use a sword freely. Inpi stood up to him and told the heir that he needed to pay for the children's medical treatment, so he would have to take the money. Murim asked him if he had come out in person, and ordered Deha to keep whatever his money was worth. Deha said that his share is there too. Murim smiled and replied that he could see that the boy had grown up. Inpi immediately came at him with a strong attack, but Deha had seen it coming and repelled the blow, feeling that it was a heavy one. Deha realized that he made one mistake, and he shouldn't block this attack. He should find an opportunity to use the sword's fury. Each time Inpi came closer and closer, and the last time he saw the guy he got a little confused and while making his attacks yelled for him to die. But Deha was faster and was able to dodge sideways away from him. Inpi was very tired, but the feeling of money was still in his head, and he decided to fight to his last breath. Inpi said he can see that the demon Lek hasn't fallen yet. He can't believe they are hiding a master like Deha. Deha replied that the real reason for that, freedom. Inpi realized in his head that too much time had passed. If he doesn't use a secret technique, this guy will be hard to kill. Don't let the air curse him. They both have a habit of driving their precious subordinates to their deaths, and used the appearance of a personal tiger. Deha thought at this moment, why was he using a secret technique in such a crowded place? And felt the direction of the wind change. Was it really Ronin's battle technique? Inpi said that he apologizes to him, but he would have to kill him with this technique. Suddenly Murim stopped them and said enough is enough. Inpi got very angry after this and asked the heir what it meant. Murim replied that the time had expired and Deha survived. Let Inpi get the money back. A man of such high morals is responsible for his words, right? Inpi got angry and said it was bullshit, and threw the money back. Murim came down and told him not to look so angry. When he arrived at the tavern, Inam asked the worker to give him a drink. The worker told him that he had done a very good job. Inam said out of anger that those 30 minutes had gone by so fast. The guy replied to him that, to be honest, the 30 minutes were long gone. It had been over an hour. Inem asked in surprise, over an hour? That was strange. If 30 minutes had already passed, why didn't he stop them since his servant was in danger? Or he was waiting for him to use a secret technique. Inyami became very angry and realized what the emperor's reason was. Murim told Da that he was holding up well. They had a good run today. The boy replied that he didn't know his sword would behave like that either. Since there were no of his comrades nearby who could have been hurt, his body reacted like this. Murim asked him if he thought there was a place for him in the demonic forest now. Deha laughed and replied that he didn't know he would be able to take off his shackles. Either way, there's a way out. What about that guy? He's strong. I didn't think he'd use a secret technique in a situation like this. If he'd prepared beforehand, he would have gotten his ass kicked. Murim asked him if he could beat him next time. Deha replied that since he had seen his secret technique, was it really what he thought? Murim turned around with a smile on his face and replied that's right, and he would leave that guy to it. Deha was surprised, for as soon as Inpi revealed his secret technique, the heir stopped entrusting him with anything. How far had he foreseen everything? In the demon ray in the center regiment, people were telling everyone to look over there. The heir is coming. The boy asked in surprise. The heir? The same one that Kolsa formatted? The girl replied that he was the very one. After that, he managed to retrieve Kanha's tavern and the Northwest lands. And next to him is the freeloader that is the former commander of the Black Blade. I heard he fought Inpi this time. Walking beside the men, Deha saw that the men began to bow to them, even realizing that they doubted the heir. Deha remembered that when he had first followed the heir, he had not had the confidence to return to the warrior circles. Even the coldness in the people's gazes was now replaced by respect. They recognized not them, however, but the feat of conquering the northwestern territories. Murim suddenly said how clean the air was today. Let the boy look around. But Deha replied to the gentleman that the glances in his direction were very strange. Murim said he didn't mean it. Let him take a closer look at the warriors. You can see that their morale has returned. All of them had already begun to realize that the demonic forest would soon spread its wings. But we can't relax. Let him go back to the tavern, and he would meet with the head and come over. When he entered the building, he looked around and saw no one. But suddenly someone said hello to him and called him the head of the Northwest Department. Murim asked, the head of the Northwest Department? And started laughing and said, he salutes the Lord of the Demonic Forest. Mugan said he was in such a good mood today. He's happy that Iron's son has finally been recognized. He's got a lot of things to do. Murim replied that he thanked the chapter for the offer. The truth is, he is short of people. He needs a person who understands finances. And the Northwest chiefs won't be messing around with money, of course. But he thinks everyone would be better off if they had someone in charge of such matters. Mugan realized that Murim was right. If you send one of their men, you don't have to worry about anything, even if there isn't enough money to pay the taxes because of the lean trade. Mugan thought for a moment and said he would send a man there. Murim immediately thanked the head for his help. Murim tells his uncle that this time he's taken possession of the Northwest. He thinks they already know that his next target is the Great Blade Clan. Mugan replied that, of course, the Central Poln had already begun secret preparations. Murim said to let him ask one question. What future does he wish for the demonic forest? Mugan replied that he wished to ensure that each of their warriors could live with their heads held proudly high. Murim asked with surprise, is that so? And said that he would fulfill his wish. Mugan asked if there was anything else he could ask. Murim turned around and replied that, of course. Mugan said he would like to get to know him better. A war with the clans of the Northwest and the Great Blade lay ahead of them. Until today, none of them could even think about it. He hadn't had a chance to socialize with him because of work. But he had known from the beginning that he was different. A demonic forest where everyone can live with their heads held high. His desire as a lord. And his desire as an uncle to break down the wall hidden behind his nephew's smile. He realizes it's been a while, but could he share his past with him? Murim thought for a moment and replied that the Great Blade could spring into action at any moment. He promised to contact him from time to time through the Northeastern office. Mugan was surprised and laughed and said he understood. Murim immediately asked for permission to deviate. Mugan told the lad that he had not been a mere brigand before after all. It did not matter who he was, how he lived, or what lay on his shoulders. He is his family first and foremost. And he'd like the demon forest to be a place he could always return to. Walking out of the room, Murim clutched his chest and asked himself if he still had those feelings. He lost his parents early, so he grew up under the tutelage of a teacher. Of course, he is grateful to him for everything he taught him. But if his father and mother were alive, they would definitely look at him with the same eyes his uncle had just looked at him with. And these feelings are clouding his judgment. Let him come to his senses immediately. This is all going to be a bad influence on him. He remembered in his head that there was his mother's wish or his teacher's dying will. If the choice was between the demonic forest and Sanshin, unfortunately, he would choose the latter. The demon forest managed to survive somehow. But Sanshin won't survive without him for long. And by the way, his uncle's dream is complicated. In order to take over Chongqing, all he has to do is get rid of the Great Blade clan. And in order to get Sichuan, you only need to bring all the clans to his feet. But since Uncle wants to see a demonic forest in front of him, where everyone can live with their heads held high, you'll have to become strong enough for everyone to have no reason to worry. Like the pinnacle of harmony, the strongest clan of the Murima. Because of the Great Blade, he won't be able to leave this land for a long time. If the family's cherished wish is fulfilled, Mom can rest in the other world with peace of mind. But suddenly Deha asked the gentleman why he was gone so long. Murim replied that the conversation had gone on too long. Deha replied that they had guests. Murim asked in surprise, "Guests? That's good, isn't it?" The guy replied that no, other guests, very important people from the Great Blade. Murim asked, so who exactly? The head himself, was it? Suddenly he answered him no, but almost. Heir to the Great Blade and one of the 5 geniuses of Sichuan. The sword of the demigod Chong Wagi. Murim asked in surprise, the heir? He had of course expected him to show up. Had he come alone? Deha answered that he had not, accompanied by Inpi. Murim told the guy that he must be really happy to see him. Deha asked the gentleman that he was joking. He should have seen his face. Opening the door, Wagi said hello to him and told him that he really is as cute as they say he is. Murim looked at Inpi and said he should open his mouth too. Did he swallow his tongue? Inpi replied that he wasn't sure they were in the right relationship to exchange greetings. Murim said he's a nerd. Did he happen to hear the expression that all men are brothers? Sitting down at the conference table, Murim asked the guy, is he hungry? Let him talk if he is. And don't be afraid. He won't try to scam you for money. Wagi thanked and said he had eaten before coming over. He would only be happy with a cup of tea. Murim told the guy to make tea if there is any. Deha replied to the gentleman that he understood. Murim told the guy that it was very good of him to come. He was just about to meet him. Wagi was surprised and asked why he hadn't come first. Murim replied that his men looked at him so fiercely, as if they were ready to devour him. I wondered if he knew. Wagi apologized and told him to warn him in advance if he suddenly wanted to visit his estate. Murim replied that he was thankful for the invitation. He would drop by when he had time, and let him remember to buy some for drinks then. Wagi said he promised to prepare some good liquor for him. Inpi watched the tea being poured for them and thought he was like a friend to the heir or something. One insolent man and the other. Murim told Deha and his men to leave them alone. Wagi also ordered Inpa, who immediately replied that he understood and would wait for him outside. Wagi said that Murim went from the son of a hunter to the heir of the demonic forest. How does it feel to make such a sudden leap? What was so important about the status of heir to a demonic forest that could bend at any moment? Wagi replied that there were many people in Sichuan who still remembered the glory of the demon forest. With his status, at least in these surroundings, he would not face scorn. Murim remembered everyone and asked him, did he think so? Well, in principle, the reception wasn't too bad. Wagi said he was curious to know what the heir's goal was. Murim replied that he wanted to get rid of the Great Blade for starters. Wagi laughed and said it wasn't a simple wish. Murim asked, is it? Isn't he overestimating his clan too much? Wagi replied that if they were an easy opponent, the demonic forest would not lose its supremacy in Chongqing. Murim said it was because there were memories of honorable times. Wagi asked him in what way. Murim replied that the leader of Sichuan, the heyday of the demonic forest. The morons who remember those times are the ones who piss off public opinion the most. Wagi said that he was a warrior of the demon forest, after all. Is he allowed to do that? Won't he be criticized for it? Murim replied that they know that the moment they recognize the worthless reality, the bright past will seem like a fiction. He's a little different. There's no bright past in his memory. And no one told him about it when he was a kid. Nothing stops him. He can lick an enemy's leg if he has to. He could also stick a knife in an ally. Wagi started laughing and replied that he liked that sort of thing. Isn't that the most effective way to survive in the Murima? And Murim is right. Survival is paramount. On the contrary, the strongest is the one who survives. That's Murim. He agrees with him completely. Murim says he's glad they think alike. The day is coming to an end, so maybe they'll ask each other a question each before they part ways. Kwagi agreed and asked the heir, would he start first? Murim replied that since he had suggested it, then he would concede. Wagi thanked the heir and wondered what to ask. Suddenly he remembered and asked Murim directly. Murim was surprised and asked if he meant him or the demon forest. Wagi replied that of course it was his. Murim said that he could see that the kid was savvy. Wagi replied that it all happened too suddenly. As soon as he gets a report about the disappearance of the branch heads, the leaders of the Northwest will turn their backs on them as well. Murim said he could take it easy. Starting tomorrow he would start releasing them one by one. Wagi thanked and replied that the relatives were very worried about them. Murim laughed and said that he was making a fiend of him. Wagi replied that he was not reproaching him for anything. That's the way their world works. One should be thankful that one is safe. Now it was the heir's turn. He asked the lad how many days he thought it would take him to break the great blade. Wagi said he thought the heir would ask something more important, and in his opinion, a few years wouldn't be enough for him. What did Murim himself think? He asked. Wagi immediately showed both hands and replied that 10 days. In that time it would be quite feasible to get rid of them. Wagi started laughing and told the heir that he was funny. He hadn't laughed like that in a long time, and since he said that the branch heads were alive, as a thank you he would give him time until they all came back. If he releases one person at a time from tomorrow, he has 6 days ahead of him. Murim said he was already scared, and he wouldn't give 10? Wagi stood up and replied that he wouldn't let him and called him buddy. Most likely, the next time they saw each other it would be their last meeting. Murim said that he hoped she would be pleasant. Wagi smiled and replied that he promises. Impi asked his master how did it go. Wagi asked, does he mean the heir? It's just as he said. He looks like a fool, but he's the exact opposite. There's no way you can let your guard down with an opponent like that. Wagi said that they would start acting while the missing comrades returned. Impi asked the Lord that he wanted to put aside the incident of the disappearance of the branch heads. Wagi said that now was not the time to hope for an uncertain future. He felt sorry for their families, but shouldn't the problem that was right in front of their noses be addressed first? Impi replied that they would begin preparations as a matter of urgency. Wagi realized that if they didn't wait, some wouldn't return. On the other hand, they were full of those who could take the place of the branch head. And you can't give in to an opponent like that. 6 days? He'll take out that heir in 2 days. Deha asked the Lord how did he like the heir. Murim replied that he said he would wipe them into powder in 10 days, but he gave him only 6. Deha said that's not what he meant. Murim asked what he meant then. The boy replied that they say that a master sees a master from afar. Murim said that you can't just ride a goat around him like that. Deha replied that he was not sure they could say that. Murim tells the guy he's right, he's a lot harder to get around. And he'll go run down to the central regiment and let Deha start getting ready. Deha was surprised and asked, prepare for what? Murim replied to hell with 10 days. He will finish them off that very night. Murim suddenly sensed that the spies of the Great Blade were following him. And by the feel of it, there were still 3 of them. After the return of the northwestern lands, the mercenaries became even more intrusive. Even though he told Jin Huan to give up on them, they're already pissing him off. From what my uncle said, he was aware of it too. If he kills these, the next ones will come. Better not to provoke the Great Blade any further. Upon entering the room he was greeted by a servant and told the heir that as he had requested, he had gathered everyone. Murim made his way inside and said he apologizes for the delay. And he thanked them for agreeing to such a late meeting. Mugan said the central regiment leadership is in place. Let the heir tell them why he called them so suddenly. Murim replied that it was necessary to strike the Great Blade. Everyone was greatly surprised and said that the guy was not all at home. Hogan asked, is he saying they should attack first? Murim replied that is correct. Hogan said that we would have to hurry up with the preparations. Murim replied that there was no time for that, we had to act now. Hogan thought for a moment and said that he definitely didn't have everyone at home. The head asked, right now? He was asked if it was too soon. It would be better to make a clear plan and then. Suddenly Murim replied that the heir to the Great Blade had come to his inn today. As they say, time flows the same for everyone. While they are making a plan, the enemy will also begin preparations. Murim said that from tomorrow they would release one hostage at a time, so there were 6 days left. If his hunch is correct, the heir will try to take the initiative. He originally asked for 10 days. I'm sure he won't think they'll make their move now. There's only one chance. Mugan said he asked everyone to calm down. He asked Murim if he was up to something. The guy replied that even though they had managed to lure the small northwestern clans to their side, the leader in terms of troop strength is still the Great Blade. However, this is only if a branch is included. The first thing they should do is reduce the number of opponents. There are a total of 500 people in the Grand Blade branch. Half of them went to investigate the disappearance of the boss. They must eliminate the spies, thus cutting the information thread, and then prevent the return of the departed warriors. The old man asked if it would be better to take advantage of the numerical advantage and hit the main military camp. Mugan replied that if the battle dragged on and the warriors of the Great Blade came together, they would be in a stalemate. Hogan said that more thought was needed then. Hassan replied that if they were to proceed according to their plan, they would have to use absolutely all their forces. They would have no way to stop the enemy if he suddenly attacked the Empty Center Regiment. Murim said that if you took the families with you, there would be no one left here. What's the point of defending a deserted place? Hogan replied that it was rightly said. Wagi got to his house at that time and said there are 6 days. And Murim is sure their thoughts are similar. Surely he didn't fully believe that he would give him 6 days. It was a promise made to mess with his head just a little bit. Qin Murim will not realize that they will start before the warriors return to Chongqing. In that case, the victory remains with him. Hogan went to the leader and told him that he had returned. The head of the Great Blade, Chong Bayan, said that he had been told he had met with the demonic forest heir. Wagi said that the head had learned so quickly. Bayan asked if it was helpful to him. The boy replied that he was able to look back at himself. Wagi told his father that he thinks they can't avoid war. The heir to the demon forest is too dangerous. We must strike at the enemy before he gets ahead of them. Bayan said that they had been giving to the demon forest financially for a long time, but all their labors were in vain. He asked who came up with the financial pressure plan. Wagi replied that it was Chief Pansayan. Bayan immediately called Yukon to him. He ordered him that he should bring him the head of the chief. Yukon immediately replied that everything would be done. Wagi told his father that he lacked charity. Bayan replied that empty charity leads to idleness in the servants. And he, as heir, should know that too. If we have to fight, we have to fight. He hoped his son had already thought of something. Wagi replied that of course he had already thought of something. Wagi said the warriors would be back in 2 days, when they would have an hour left before arriving at the clan. The boy replied that it was he, Tang Yel, and a message had come for the Lord. Bayan told him to bring it here. The master began to read the message and became very stiff. Wagi asked, what does it say? Bayan replied that the demonic forest was going to leave the central regiment empty and hit the branch warriors. If they didn't introduce a human, the situation would become much more dangerous. Wagi figured they wanted to get rid of their men and take over the numerical superiority. He had assumed that the heir would be the first to act, but he didn't think it would be so soon. Wagi said that adjustments would have to be made to their plan. But suddenly the master replied that he was still just as bad at hiding his feelings. Wagi realized his mistake and apologized. Bayan said that since he had drawn his weapon, there should be no doubt. One must take not only the enemy's life but also his soul, even if he has to lose his arm. Wagi replied that he understood. Bayan said the enemy could strike from any direction. Let them be prepared for anything. But Wagi told the head to stop. Bayan asked what else? Guy replied that the demonic forest was planning to strike the former warriors in order to take numerical superiority. Bayan asked, weren't they going to prevent that? Wagi replied that meeting Chin Murup had helped him take a new look at himself. He had also learned something. Bayan asked what else? Wagi replied that Plan A and Plan B. He wishes to go with Plan B. Bayan said for his son to continue. Wagi said he had said to take not only the enemy's life but also his soul, even if he had to lose his own hand. Bayan replied that that's exactly what it is. Wagi said that when a plan that he thought was perfect fails, a great deal of frustration comes to my throat, and even with this loss, they still outnumber the enemy. The Devil Flower gathered, and even the Demonic Forest Special Forces squad also came. The Devil Flower Ka Yakpin became the commander. The head of the chamber, Taesan Cho Pension, came over and asked if everything was ready. Jakbin walked over and replied that he was greeted by the Devil Flower commander. The warriors are divided into 10 groups. Pension said that he was grateful for their efforts at this late hour. Yaoping replied that after all, they were facing a battle with a strong enemy. But why is he here? Pension said that even though he resigned, no one should sit idle. His son asked him to give him protection. But suddenly a scout came and said that orders had been given to follow a secret path to the hideout. Pension said that meant they were starting, and wished them all good luck. Suddenly, Murup knocked out some scouts from the enemy group and said that they were the last ones. Mugon said it was a great job. Finally got rid of those bugs. Murup said their people are safe now. It was time to act. Mugon replied that the moment had indeed come, and it's time to distribute to their units, and the rendezvous would be at the appointed place. The boys immediately wished their master good luck. Hassan also said that he believed in his men. Mugon headed off with his men and turned back to see Murup keeping up. He knew he had not wasted time. The sacred technique of iron snow flow can only be mastered by women. A technique like Murup's doesn't exist in their clan. It looks like he was trained by someone else. Mugon told the guy to tell him if it's hard. There is time. Murup answered his uncle to tell them to stop here. Mugon asked, right now? Murup replied yes, right now. The head asked, what's the matter? Wasn't he the one who suggested hitting the enemy army? Murup replied that it was only Plan B. Mugon asked Plan B with surprise, why didn't he choose Plan A? Murup replied that when he went to the Central Regiment before the meeting, there were 3 spies hiding nearby. However, they caught only 2. Mugon realized that, in other words, the information had leaked out. Murup said that 3 men were not enough to keep track of the entire Central Regiment. There are enemy mercenaries inside, and this is one of those who attended the recent meeting. Mugon didn't believe it and said there was no such thing. The leadership has served the clan faithfully for decades. Murup said that the starting point seems to have been the capture of the Northwest. Since only 3 people were assigned to surveillance, there must be a more proven spy among them. Murup realized it was Zhang Wagi, who then asked him about the one responsible for the disappearance of their superiors. His resolute reply looked like he hadn't even suspected the demonic forest from the beginning. His abilities have only been seen by Deha and the leader of the Coals. Deha has been removed from his important position, so he is no longer a candidate. And the leader of the Coals he's scared so that he will definitely not join the Great Blade again. Despite all this, Zhang Wagi's first thought was him being beaten up by the thugs from the unholy path. Somehow, that doesn't make sense. Murup said that during the meeting he said about Plan B because he had assumed in advance that there was an internal spy. Without the mercenary among them, they would have proceeded with it. But now they would have to switch to Plan A. Mugon asked what should be done. Murup replied that since they had only caught 2 of them, the 3rd had already left to pass information to the enemy. The head of the Black Soul Squad, Chi Warren, said that in such a case, the enemy might surround them. Murup replied that no, they would not come. Vorin asked, does he mean the enemy will not save his men? Murup thought that someone who likes to work with his head wouldn't want to deviate from his plans. Zhang Wagi is definitely hoping that they will dance to his tune. Murup said he mentioned the secondary plan during the meeting to take numerical superiority. If the northwestern clans take the hit, they will still be outnumbered. Is he implying that the enemy will abandon the allies and attack the northwest? Murup replied that that's exactly what Zhang Wagi would do. Mugon thought that one could surely expect such a thing from the heir to the Great Blade and his father, who only chased after his own gain. Mugon said they couldn't abandon the northwestern clans. They've gone over to their side. We must go to their aid now. Murim replied to his uncle that he was right. Time to put the last piece of the puzzle together. But suddenly in a moment an ally saw and asked. Hassan immediately said that they had to go back. The boy asked him what he was talking about. What do you mean, going back? Hassan replied that the situation in Chongqing had changed. The head ordered to return to the central regiment now, and they would find out the details on the spot. The boy replied to the gentleman that he was listening and they would leave at once. Hassan suddenly wondered if they had a spy in the leadership. Murim called everyone together and said that there was a rat among them. Hassan replied that he could not believe his ears. Murim said that everyone who was present at the meeting today is under suspicion. Let them stop the troops where he tells them to. Some of them who find out that the plans have changed, 100% will go into a stupor. Have them keep a close eye on everyone. Hogan agreed and replied that, as they say, it's worth a try. Suddenly Hassan noticed that Commander Cho Yanghil was following him, and he hoped it wasn't him. The head of the department, Mengyem Chonggung, asked in surprise. Hogan replied that it looked like there was a change of plans. John Gunn said that not even an hour had passed since they had set off. What could have happened in that time? Hogan replied that he didn't know the details himself. They will explain the situation when they return. John Gunn grabbed his head and said they would catch their breath and move on. Hogan agreed and replied that he understood. Chanyun told Main's squad that they were taking a short break and returning to the clan. Hogan was immediately worried and hoped that these weren't his loyalists. After all, it would be over very quickly. John Gunn headed into the forest at this time and started sharing information with his enemies. The scout asked, "Walking back? What kind of nonsense is this?" But Chanyun left the letter on the tree, and the enemy seeing it tried to take it. But suddenly, in a sudden moment, he lost his hand. Han Sovel, the commander of the Demon Forest secret squad, cut him open and said that they had a spy. Have them capture him and interrogate him. But Spawn replied that they wouldn't be expecting that, and immediately bit down on the pill that was in his mouth beforehand. Sol realized that he had deadly poison in his mouth. The warriors asked the commander, "Were those words true?" Sol replied that he didn't believe it either. It remained to be seen for himself. Immediately he opened the letter. Sovel said he had hoped it was a lie, but the traitor turned out to be their immediate superior. John Gunn immediately came and told his master that he was here. Hogan asked if everything was ready. The warrior replied that yes, and said that he could not see his troop. But suddenly out of the blue the troop came and said they were here. But Jonggung saw in his hands his letter that he had left in the forest. John Gunn tried to justify himself, but Sol said he didn't want to believe it either. Why was he carrying on secret correspondence with the enemy? Chanyun replied to the commander that it was just a misunderstanding. Hogan asked him how long ago he had betrayed them. Zhonggong replied to the Lord that it was someone's evil machination against him. He has been serving the demon forest for 40 years. Some piece of paper is more trustworthy than his years of loyalty to the clan. Let the Lord say something. His squad had misunderstood. Hogan immediately told him to shut up immediately and asked him why he had done such a stupid thing. Had he sold the honor of his subordinates and comrades for his own profit? John Gunn immediately in his head realized that this was the end. And crying he said that the holy ship began to sink little by little and the mast broke. Hogan asked, is that why he became a traitor? Zhonggung replied that to become a hero or a traitor is to walk on the edge of a cliff. If you fail, you remain an enemy. But if you carefully hide, you become a hero of the Great Blade. Let him kill him by telling Zhonggung to the Lord. Hogan was surprised and realized that he was not even remorseful for what he had done. Hogan said that according to the rules, the traitor would be executed on the spot. John Gunn replied that he doesn't blame them. Let them carry out the execution. Hogan showed his true sword aura and lastly said that it was worth finding out about his family. Arriving at the temporary shelter of the demonic forest, Murim said that everything was in place. But suddenly they started talking. What a horror has happened. He can't believe that the head of M turned out to be a spy. And he was like a brother to him. Hassan told him that if they didn't pull together, they would undermine the warriors' morale. We must pull ourselves together. But suddenly Deha came and greeted everyone. Mugan asked him how come. The boy replied that he was doing the work that the heir had given him to do. Mugan asked with surprise, the heir? The warrior asked, has it started? Deha replied to the Lord. Just recently 5 fiery arrows had been fired. Just as he said, the great blade attacked the northwest. The warrior was surprised in a moment and realized that the heir's assumption was true. Is this definitely the same sucker that was beaten up by Cole's gang? Mugan said that since he had been in charge of everything so far, then they would listen to his opinion first. Murim asked Da any news about the head of the great blade. The lad replied that after the arrows were launched, all the overseers had gathered together, but no one had seen the head. Murim said that judging from the fact that the old man didn't show up, he's probably at his palace. Because of the battle in the northwest, there's probably almost no one in the palace. We need to grab the head now. They can't abandon the northwest after siding with them. If the Great Blade clan is empty, Mugan immediately ordered that they should occupy the enemy's military camp and cut off the head of the head. We must hurry in order to save their allies. Deha said he had found a path that was not guarded by anyone. Let him lead them. Murim at this time hoped that they would only last an hour. At this time the Great Blade clan in the department of Unsen Bayan spoke, looking at the northwest, that said, "What a beautiful sky." Bin asked the head of Unsong, "Isn't that right?" Inpi thought about beheading a high-ranking official for the slightest provocation. Wagi said it was time for them to get ready too. Inpi replied to the Lord that was correct. All of the Ronin are now assembled. Wagi told his father that he promised to burn the demon forest to the ground. But the head told him to wait. But wouldn't it be better to hurry up? Bin replied that he knew it, no one could be relied on. Wagi asked his father what he was talking about. The head replied to his son that he was pathetic. Burn the demon forest to the ground? But suddenly at a moment's notice the doors opened beside them and Mogan and his troops rushed in. Bin said that if he wasn't his offspring, he'd be headless too. And in a moment Murim came and told Kwagi that he was glad to see him. Wasn't that their promise? He asked. The 800 soldiers of the demonic forest's main force had arrived safely at the Great Blade clan. Murim said what a blessing it was for him to meet young Wagi again. The boy was very surprised at that. Wagi immediately thought, why was he here and not at the branch? At what fucking point did everything go wrong? Murim told him that he seemed to be wondering when things had gone south. Too bad, he thought Wagi would be a more interesting type. Mugan told Head Chan that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. The head replied that it had been a long time, of course. Mugan said that he wanted to see him so badly, but he still hadn't accepted his invitation, so he decided to visit him. Is it okay with Chief Zhang? Head Chan asked with surprise. Should he? If he hadn't come here, he would have found him himself. He realized that the enemy had surrounded them, but with the exception of the Ronins, there are only 100 fighters left in the clan. And judging by the increasing shouts outside, it won't be long before the rest of the enemy arrives. Chief Chan said he didn't think he would encounter something like this in his own home. Wagi told his father that he would make a way for them. They could make a difference if they reached the northwest. Head Chan replied that his son's life was at stake. Impi said it was worth starting before the pressure got any worse. Wagi replied that was correct. Wagi immediately sprang into action and told his father to run after him. But Mugan did not lag behind either and told Muripu to leave the head to him. Head Hassan said that it had all started and now they were in an advantageous position. One only needs to utter the nickname of Chong Bayan Sacred Sword Sichuan in Murim to realize how difficult an opponent it is. However, the demonic sword of destruction named Mugan is a figure no less illustrious. Wagi saw that things were bad and decided to attack. But Bayan told him to come to his senses and not to dare use that technique. Let him not show it unless he's sure he can kill all the witnesses. Let him die himself. Mugan immediately ordered his own to block their escape route. We can't let the enemy out. Murim watched the air and wondered if it seemed to him this technique just now was very familiar to him. Mugan said to have them surround him and let them get out. Murim climbed up on the rooftops and decided he wished he had a better look at him. His uncle has clashed with the head of the Great Blade. It's a win or lose situation. The loser loses everything, and the Wagi and the Ronins have formed a circle. If we don't watch out, they can get to Uncle. He realized that Inpi had to be dealt with first. Where was Deha lost? But suddenly he saw that he was in a bunch of soldiers. Murim turned to Deha and told him not to think of allies. His task is to eliminate Inpi. Deha slapped his face and realized that the air was right. In such a situation, you can't hesitate. Deha immediately changed and became one with his sword and attacked, shouting to the enemy that he was finished. Impi was greatly surprised at this unexpected situation, but he managed to dodge and put his sword under Deha's attack. Deha said he would die today at the hands of this very freeloader. Murup watched and saw that he was right. The rest of the Ronin's eyes went wide. Murup immediately ordered Narim and Wirim to come up to him. Wirim asked the heir what was the matter. Murup said these are all the warriors left in the clan. Have him take half the troops with him, and they'll go to the northwest to help. He'll catch up when he's done here. Wirim replied that he understood and they would wait for him. Hogan called out to the commander of the Black Soul Squad and ordered him that he was not to move away from the heir until the battle was over. The commander replied that he understood. Hogan wished the heir good luck in farewell. But Murup did not like it and saw that the old man was again with his sentiments. And speaking of which, Murup saw that there was some weirdness between the movements in his technique. It's like there's something missing from Head Cheon. It felt like he was purposely avoiding the most effective moves. But suddenly Murup realized everything. The commander asked the heir, "Is something wrong?" Murup replied that there was work for him to do. He threw an object into his hands and told him to give Wan's department a message. The commander asked, "This plaque?" Murup replied that yes, and it was urgent. The commander immediately went and said he would do it. And he was sure that the heir had given such an order for a reason. The commander came to the head and said that Mr. Heir asked for a message. Wanma asked what it was. The commander threw the object into his hands and replied that he didn't know. That was it, the order. And it was time for him to go. Wanma asked if he could at least explain why he needed it. The commander came to the roof and told the heir that he had accomplished what he had asked him to do. But suddenly he saw that no one was there. Mugon was fighting at this time and told the head of Chan to put his hands down. He has nowhere to run. Victory is theirs. Let him surrender and keep his men safe. But Head Jong immediately grabbed his son and put him in front of Head Mugon. He said that surrendering was only over his dead body. Mugon was surprised and asked him, "Is he making a shield out of his own child?" Turns out the head of Chan is disgusted. Immediately, Wagi stood up for his father. Wagi was surprised at this and turned to his father. But Head Chan answered him to prove at least now that he was useful. Head Chong started running away and said that he thought he could injure that brat Cho Mugon. If it wasn't for his technique. It's not over yet. We need to reach their forces from the northwest. But suddenly he felt a bad technique and stopped. Head Chong asked the guy, "So is he the heir of the demonic forest?" Murup immediately turned to Chong Bayan. Bayan asked him, "Did he come alone? Is he really that fearless?" Murup replied, "How can he tell?" and asked who is really fearless. Him or the head of Jong Bayan. Murup said he wondered how a clan with a history of just over a decade could take over the entire Chunkian at once. But now he was beginning to realize what this was all about. Bayan suddenly felt such a powerful rush of cold. Bayan asked the guy who he was. Murup replied that it was none of his business. Time to take away his technique. Thousands of sharp blades streaming skyward. Mugon was pressing the boy a bit, and suddenly Wagi immediately remembered his father's words for his son to prove himself useful. Wagi started to smile and asked, "Prove useful?" And that's when he would prove it now. And immediately raised his sword above his head. Mugon was immediately surprised and thought, was he really going to give up his life for his daddy? Mugon ordered the head of Wan to set foot in the northwest immediately. He will try to join as soon as possible. Wanma told the Lord to be careful. He would leave him a black soul troop. Suddenly, Mugon stood in front of the Chan clan's heir and watched what he would do. Mugon closed his eyes and sensed the guy was taking advantage of the reverse circulation. And it turns out he had an ace up his sleeve. Mugon took his blade in his hands and attacking told the guy to forgive him. But he wasn't the only one here. Deha was a bit distracted at this time, and Inpi called him a freeloader and asked him where he was looking, and used a lightning wind moon sword attack against him. Deha said that the heir was in danger and he didn't give a shit. Inpi replied that it wouldn't take long for the freeloader to get to him. Let him be thankful he's not hitting full force. Deha told him to take his time to rejoice. Victory would only be for him. Impi was surprised and asked what. Deha launched a crushing attack on him and said that he had already analyzed all of his moves. Deha realized that thanks to his heir, he had Impi defeated him in no time. and he hoped he would meet a good master in his next life. Mugan told Deha that he was watching, that the two of them had made quick work of it. The boy was pleased and replied that he was glad the master was in one piece. Mugan said the kid used reverse circulation. And what did his own father teach him? The heir was killed by his own energy. He can't believe he sacrificed himself for such a bastard. Mugan said that he would never forgive Bayan. Immediately he said for the warriors of the Great Blade to listen to him. Mugan says their leader has escaped. The heir and Ronin Mug Inpi are dead. He does not wish to continue this senseless bloodshed. And so he asks that they put down their weapons and surrender. The warriors realized that there was no point in fighting and dropped their weapons, all sat down on their knees. This day was the victory of the main unit of the demonic forest. Mugan realized in his head that now he had to defend the northwest. Half the squad had already gone there. There shouldn't be any problems. When they found out what had happened there, the remaining enemies would probably surrender as well. Mugan clenched his fist and said that the moment had finally arrived, and it was all thanks to Murim, and at once he thanked his nephew. But suddenly taking his hands off his face he asked the guy what was his true identity. How did the demonic forest heir know the Blade Star technique? Murim immediately remembered of the worst war in the history of Murim, the victorious battle. His teacher had told him as a child that probably the most brutal battle was the Battle of the 8 Stars and the Union of the Saviors of the Heavens. Murim asked him, 8 stars? The teacher replied that yes, he meant those who mastered his techniques. If a man has not lost his fear, he will stop. But if he suddenly sees someone using his techniques, and let no way, he will not leave him alone. Murim said that Man Yen, nicknamed the Blade Star, was the very first of the 8 stars to die. He was the one who first drove the sacred dragon into a stalemate. His son's movements struck him as extremely strange, until among them he noticed the traces of the technique of 1,000 sharp blades streaming skyward. And if he had learned the Blade Star technique, it was now clear how he had managed to take the supremacy in Chongqing in just 10 years. Bin got angry and said he asked the guy who he was. Murim replied not to make him repeat himself. Who else knows the 8-star techniques besides him? Bin told the guy to answer his question first. Murim asked what he didn't want to mean. Murim immediately used the 8 heaven shining deity and told the head of Chong that he was right. It is not right for the head to have a long tongue, but perhaps he would regret not answering. And Murim attacked the head with an elusive palm. Bayan was surprised and thought, is this really a palm technique? How would it help him from a long distance? The head told the guy that was it. But suddenly he saw an attack in front of his face, and he didn't expect that. Bayan said it couldn't be. It's the palm of a star, the elusive palm technique of one of the 8 stars. Murim asked him, did the urge to speak arise? And immediately placed his palm over Bayan's body. Bayan tried to counter it, but he didn't have as much strength to fend it off, and slowly sat on his knees from the sheer force. Bayan immediately felt that he wasn't doing well, and he had no idea where he got his 8-star techniques from, but he suddenly stood up and launched an attack. Bin told the heir that he thought he could stop the head by some cheap star palm trick. Murim asked with surprise at him, so does that mean he knows him? And this is already interesting. But at that time the squad leader was looking for the heir in the forest and shouted. The commander ran through the forest and wondered where the heir had managed to get to in the meantime. His mistake. He should have been more careful, but suddenly he stopped and said that where the sounds were coming from must never be there. Is it really there? Bayan with different ways tried to destroy this guy and not leaving behind anyone who would know about this technique. Murim dodged and felt that this was not the same Chong Bayan who had fought his uncle. Apparently, he realized that there was no point in hiding his power anymore. After his last technique, on the contrary, he shortened the distance between them. Is there a reason for his self-confidence? But Bayan at one point used an attack, a shooting star. But Murim got a big laugh and was surprised. The head asked the guy if he was amused. Enough of the empty bluster. Murim asked him if he was sure it was empty. Murim started dodging all of his attacks and thought that judging from the fact that Chong Bayan wielded a shooting star, he had learned the half of it. Bayan asked the guy who taught him the palm star technique. Murim replied that he had too many questions from someone who was about to die. He'd better let him answer him. 1,000 sharp blades of flowing sky. But suddenly Bayan felt in the moment that things were going badly. Bayan said right away that he's controlling the distance. And why is the guy getting even closer? Between using palm techniques, it takes quite a bit of time to recover. The head thought the same, as if he had a sacred dragon in front of him, the strongest warrior in the world. Here he doesn't know. But it's unlikely that someone their heir to the demonic forest would be able to regenerate strength in no time. Did he think he didn't possess anything else? Bayan suddenly froze when he saw that the guy was using his fist. Murim told him that even if he learned the absolute teachings of the sacred techniques, without talent there was no use for it. The heir didn't play with it for long and used 1,000 mundane hands. Sickle-shaped fist. Bayan asked in surprise, a sickle-shaped victory fist? He mastered the star fist technique as well. Murim told him not to play dumb. A guy from the Huanghe River had survived a blow much more powerful than this one. Bayan started getting crushing blows, couldn't even deal with them. He saw that the guy was avoiding the powerful attacks so he could keep throwing punches. He can withstand the pain if he protects the energy pathways. But the problem is that energy penetrates even the bones. And the guy's a real scumbag. He seems to know what this is all about. The heir is endowed with the heavenly and he'll let him take one blow to catch his breath. Murim did not stop there, and struck a strong and crushing blow. Bayan came to his senses and said that he had been thrown far away, and he now had time to restore his energy. But suddenly, out of the blue, Murim came down right in front of him. Murim said he's obviously surprised at how quickly he got here. The palm and fist techniques are not all, there is also the step technique. He immediately used the heaven step, frightening war spirit against him, and smashed right into the head's head. Bayan was greatly surprised that it wasn't even possible. How could he possibly know so many old techniques? Bayan turned around and asked him who he even was. Murim replied that the original was a cheap knockoff, unlike him. What's he doing lying on the ground like a dog anyway? Let him realize his place and surrender. Bayan said he didn't care at all. Murim pretended he didn't hear anything and asked what he didn't care about. Bayan showed his magic and said he didn't care who he was. He will kill him here at any cost. Murim sensed that the head was using reverse circulation. Apparently he didn't give a shit what the text roots were. The head said that being a Murimian, he would put anything on the line to take him to hell with him. Murim saw blood gushing out of the 7 holes and dangerous energy. Judging from his desperate actions, he prepared to die. Energy confrontation takes a lot of inner strength. You can't do it with one punch. Maybe a technique. But suddenly an idea popped into his head, and he realized everything. The head had told him to attack. This is their last fight. Murim immediately realized all by himself that Chong Bayan would die quietly himself. The head told the guy to stand still. Bayan asked the guy what kind of warrior is he after that. Let him stop immediately and keep fighting. Murim asked with surprise, a warrior? And this he hears from one who threw his son to certain death, and gave Drapic himself? And it seems that someone like him has no concept of family. Bayan became very angry after saying such loud words. Murim realized he wasn't an idiot to fight someone who would eventually endanger himself. And now he had restrictions placed on him. In the battle with Uncle Zhang Bayan, he suffered internal injuries. Therefore, it's enough to run around with him for about half an hour. And right now, the most important thing for him to do is to keep his attention on him. We have to keep the dog on a short leash to keep him from getting to the people of the demon forest. Murim told the old man that he felt sorry for him, that he was chasing him hard, but he likes balanced decisions. But suddenly the commander came and told the heir that he was here. Murim immediately realized that he had no place here at all. The head called the commander a worm and told him to get out of the way. But the commander himself went into battle with the head to protect the heir. He stood up to defend himself, but he regretted a lot afterwards because the head was much stronger than him, and it was a strong attack that was hard to deal with. The commander was surprised after defending the heir, for it appeared that the head was such a big difference in strength. Bayan told the guy he was going to rip him to shreds. But Murim decided to help him and used the elusive palm. The commander was greatly surprised after this and approached the heir. Murim told him to move to the side. The commander replied to the lord that it was dangerous. In his head, he thought the heir had struck that blow. He can't believe his eyes, and they can't lose the man who will give the clan a bright future. But the commander turned to him and begged him for the lord to trust him. The head began to launch attacks and easily repelled them all. He started laughing and told the heir that here he was buying it. Murim asked him if he was glad. The head replied that he was glad. He had finally stopped running away, but suddenly he saw a sword appear in the heir's hands. He asked the boy where did he get the sword from. Murim asked him, did the head really think he was carrying it around like a keychain? He had only learned half of it. Murim asked him, 1,000 sharp blades of flowing sky, wasn't it? But suddenly he felt and attacked the head on the right. The head was badly injured, and in his head he knew it was impossible. He had changed his movements even before the swords collided. Skillful energy management and lightning-fast swings. Is this the final part of 1,000 sharp blades of streaming sky? Murim replied that it was the very one he did not have. The head was greatly surprised and couldn't believe he could do it. Murim asked, what's the big deal? He is allowed and others are not? Does he think he is special? Murim said that he was afraid that the head was greatly mistaken, and immediately used a sword net over the head. The head was unable to react at that moment, and was badly wounded. The commander was surprised that he didn't see his steps or sword movements. The heir in front of him was definitely the same heir they knew. Murim said that he was born with the heavenly in trait, so everything within him, and it starts to become covered in ice when the power is misused. However, by taking the heavenly yang pill, he manages to contain the excessive flow of yin energy. And probably, in his head, it all seems like a godsend. But to him, it's nothing more than a terrible curse. He sees a wastrel who is trying to take control of all of Chongqing, not even possessing the full-fledged technique of the 1,000 sharp blades of the flowing sky. Isn't that silly? Bian said he understood everything. A monster that possesses the sword, fist, and palm star technique. The answer is only one clan head of the 8 Emperor clan. Let the guy admit that he is his student? Murim said he'd tell him to shut the fuck up. If it were up to him, he'd find his corpse and burn it to the ground. Murim replied that he would tell him everything if he answered his question. He's screwed anyway, he's aware of that, right? The head said what a pathetic ending. Murim suggested that they reveal the cards one last time. Where had he mastered the 1,000 sharp blades of the flowing sky? The head asked in response, who else dares to teach this technique if not the head of the 8 emperors? Murim asked him, had he personally trained him? He understood in his head that the sword star Man Yen had died at the hands of the sacred dragon at Mutin Mountain just before the war started. If Chong Bian is his follower, it is understandable how he survived the celestial battle. The head said that he didn't serve the 8 Emperor clan, but the Sword Star. His dream was to defeat the sacred dragon and take over the world with his techniques. But that's not going to happen now. Murim said he was a fool. Did he think the head of the 8 emperors would have lost the war if someone like him could defeat a sacred dragon? The heir looked at him and said that his end was truly pitiful. The surviving followers of the 8 Emperor clan who colored the earth scarlet, and those who opposed the war gathered under the banner of Sankon. Others, like Zhongbian, are living with their true colors. Despite the fact that 30 years have passed since the celestial battle, those who wish to avenge past wrongs still visit the valley from Murim. Murim said they're nits and you can't catch them. But he suddenly grabbed his chest and realized that he had overdone it a bit. The commander approached and asked the heir if he was okay. Murim replied that he was fine and told him to be on the lookout. Murim crouched to the side, determined to heal his body after his horrible battle with the head Bian. The commander looked on and couldn't believe that the heir surpassed Zhang Bian's own strength. Was he deliberately hiding his abilities all this time? Surely there must be some reason for his feigning weakness in letting Charles' gang beat him up. He swears to keep his mouth shut. Murim came to his senses and said that there was progress. This time he was able to restore his energy balance much faster. And now there's a chance that it won't be long before he can remove the restrictions and make both energies a part of himself. Here all around bloomed, and the commander asked the heir if it was all over. Murim replied that it was, and told the commander to take the corpse. After all, it's time to put an end to this war. And the war, surprisingly, ended without a hitch. The goal of the Northwest leadership was not victory, but survival. The reinforcements from the demon forest made it to their destination in time. However, after the enemies saw the head of their head, they immediately dropped their weapons. The Great Blade and the Demon Forest. The Demon Forest and the Great Blade. The warriors immediately rejoiced afterward and raised their blades to the sky and shouted that they had won. After more than a decade, The battle for the power of Chongqing finally brought down the curtain. The next day Murim was saying that even with the war there was not so much trouble. He asked Day how was it going? Decca replied that the prisoners have been rounded up and the casualties are being dealt with by the Northwest leadership. Due to the very short history of the Great Blade, the prisoners are for the most part Ronin or warriors of fallen clans. Murim said that Mug Inpi had scraped up a lot of shit. Deha realized that in the end, the heir had kept his word. He is indeed an outstanding person. Deha told the gentleman that he had done a brilliant job. Let him express his respect to him. Murim replied that he should continue in the same manner. Deha asked if he could ask one question. Murim replied to let him speak, if only respectfully. Deha said that his intention to take possession of Chongqing eventually came true. What is his next goal? Murim asked with surprise. The next target? Would he believe him if he was told? Deha replied that of course he would. He sees that he needs to live with the light in front of him, and to live with his head held high, and fulfill what everyone desires. Deha asked, what does everyone wish for? Murim replied that it is the most powerful force of Sichuan. The foundation in the form of Chongqing has already been laid, and they will deal with everything else gradually. And until the day comes when the demon forest will regain its former glory. But that's a long way off. But suddenly Commander Vorin ran up and told the heir that the clan leader was looking for him. Murim asked him. Vorin replied that it was impossible to say for sure. And then came the conversation about the death of Sichuan's sacred sword Chong Bayan. Mugan asked who had killed him. Murim understood that Vorin had promised not to run his mouth about what had happened. So he had to give his uncle a good deal of noodles, and he made up a fairy tale in which he was saved by some mysterious martial arts master. Although, on the other hand, there is some truth in it because he is really mysterious. And suddenly he remembered his uncle's words, how he had told him that he had not been a simple brigand after all. And now he didn't know how his uncle would take their machinations. Murim came and asked the Lord if he had summoned him. The commander told the heir that they were waiting for him. Murim said that he was watching, and that they had visitors from the northwest. Mugan laughed and replied that it was worth celebrating the victory over the Great Blade. And he did a great job. Let him keep it up. They've resolved some issues with the northwest. The head said that they managed to get 3 million silver from the Great Blade. Out of that money, Lord donated 1 million Nyan to rebuild the Northwest, and they vow to never forget their kindness and courtesy. Mugan replied and suggested that they should not swear again. Murim understood that the decision was not an easy one. It was clear why the head of the Sok clan was so pleased. He told the chief that the conversation was a success. And what was the occasion for which he called him? Mugan replied that he wanted to reward him for his services. Father gave such an order. He is the current head of the demonic forest, announces the following. The exploits of Qin Murim's heir had a tremendous impact on the future of their clan, as this result was brought about by his exceptional unselfishness. According to the order of the previous head of the demonic forest, he is appointed as the commander of the Shining Dragon squad from the present moment. Murim was surprised and thought, what other Shining Dragon is there? Mugan said it was an independent unit with no physical point that would henceforth only follow his orders. Hogan tells the heir that the Lord is reading out the appointment order. He realizes that he is confused, but let him not forget the formalities. Murim said that he accepts the order. Mugan replied that he would then allow the commander's seal and the sword of silver light to be presented to him. May he not forget his duty and be loyal to the squad. Hassan told the heir that this sword had a special symbolism. It was used by his mother. The silver light sword was the one thing his grandfather couldn't get rid of after breaking up with his daughter. And what's more, in his lifetime, his mother had been a member of the Shining Dragon unit. Murim couldn't believe it was his mother's sword. Mugan said that at the age of 16, his sister had eliminated 3 of Mount Ken's enemy forces, for which she was later appointed vice-commander of the Shining Dragon Squad, which was then led by his older brother, and everyone in the Demon Forest was proud of them. May he accept the will of the departed for the sake of the continued prosperity of the troop. Murim said he would listen and obey. Mugan knew in his head that prosperity was certainly a good thing, but it was more likely that his father wanted Murim to win the love of those around him. Mugan asked his father, didn't he? But Pension was sitting in his room at that time and heard his son's question. Hassan said that the squad's overnight stay was prepared in the tent of peaceful light that was in the southwestern part of the Central Regiment. And they congratulated him on becoming commander of the Shining Dragon. Everyone congratulated him at once. Murim listened to all the congratulations and said that then he would go. Hogan turned to his friend. But Hassan asked him what was wrong. The old man asked if he should have mentioned the composition of the squad after all. Hassan replied that he was sure the air would do fine. Deha on his way out asked the gentleman if he had heard. Deha said the commander of the Black Soul squad said that the composition of his squad was slightly unusual. Murim asked, "Unusual? Is there a real lizard in there?" Deha replied that as far as he knew, those men had previously served in the Great Blade. They had held command positions. They set off to investigate the disappearance, but by the time they returned, the Great Blade had been defeated and all units disbanded. And most likely, those people are extremely hostile as he is the main reason for the fall of the Great Blade. Murim said that, in other words, they were deprived of bread and now they were forced to work for it. Deha replied that this was the case. Murim realized that the strong warriors who had accepted defeat from the demonic forest. Putting such people in command of their clan's position would surely bring out the unwanted. Is he the only one who can keep them in line? Then we need to get to know them, and let Deha not be afraid. The guy replied, so the heir wouldn't say anything stupid. Arriving at the Central Regiment, he opened the door and saw all the soldiers looking at him intently. Murim said he didn't know any of them, but they looked threatening. Punan asked him, is he the heir? Murim's response was spot on. He is an outstanding strategist and a real sweetheart who dispersed the enemy forces by stealing the leadership, changed the martial situation by swaying the northwestern clans to his side, won the mind games against Wagi, and of course he wiped the hell out of the Great Blade. And then Deha said his name too, but he didn't have as many accomplishments. Murim said he suggests they leave the past in the past. They are now part of the demonic forest, and he asked to love and pity him, and called them Salaga. All at once were surprised at such an introduction and were silent. The Shining Dragon squad was disbanded for an extended period of time, which left the building in a pretty bad way. And this is where they live now, so it's time to get the rags and go ahead and clean up. And replied at once that everything would be done. Yen ordered Jucho and Hu Yen followed him, who was surprised after saying this and said that they would fetch water then. Murim told Da to see how malleable they are. The guy replied that despite the resentment, they just don't have a choice. Since they've given up, they'll have to prove their favor. Murim said they were still better than the empty-headed idiots. He didn't give a damn about their past accomplishments. People like them should be treated more harshly than usual. Most of the captives had joined the various organizations of the Demon Forest. It's a good thing he was assigned here. There's no need to worry about anything. And the man with the bucket is called Poon Yong. He's better known by his nickname, Lightning Sword. From the looks of him, he's a man with a temper. And that hulking Han Jen, well versed in the art of the single-bladed sword. Both of them led their squads in the Great Blade. I can see why they're so puffed up. And a tall guy named Ju Cho is a spear master. Hu Yen is an excellent archer of short stature. What about that monk? Murim replied that he wasn't a monk. His name is Yung Yu. He uses a stick in battle. Despite such a young age, they were all considered elite. They would have suffered huge losses without their plan. Murim asked, what does he have to re-educate them now? Let him tell them not to overexert themselves. Surprised to hear him say that. Hadn't he planned to treat them harshly? Murim replied that he was fed up with everything. Let them give him some rest too. And speaking of raising those types, he's already assigned someone to do it. Tell him to let me know if anything happens. He's going for a walk. Deha asked with surprise. Someone? The boy asked while cleaning what kind of person is their current leader, who replied that he was said to be the reason for the demonic forest's victory. Cho said that they were lucky to be subordinate to such a person, who replied that it was useless to blame others. The Great Blade fell because of them. Cho asked why would that be? He was actually fighting hard. Who said he thought the others were bullshitting? He certainly didn't fight better than him. Cho rejected all his breakdowns and called him a poor shot, who replied that he specialized in ranged combat. But unexpectedly, Chu himself came in and used his head suppression powers. It was said that Hu Yen was the person responsible for the attack on the northwest. The former unit has been destroyed. Hu asked what the hell was the monster of the northwest doing here. Chu said hello and replied that he was their warden from this day forward. And then Deha realized everything, because that's who the heir was talking about. Chu asked the guy what he saw. The guy didn't know about filial respect. Hu didn't understand anything and asked, "What do you mean?" Chu asked why he was swearing in front of his elders. Deha understood that it was called subordination. Cho said they were each other's age. Chu was surprised and replied not to say anything. Compared to the dwarf, he is an old man altogether. Cho got angry and told him to stop talking like that. Chu asked the monk, "Are these two really the same age?" The monk started laughing and answered him that he was not a monk. Chu asked him why he shaved his head then. The monk replied that he hadn't shaved anything. The hair just fell out. Deha said that this Chu has a real talent for pissing people off. Murim found some inscriptions in the wall and asked if this was left over from the predecessors, and he can see at once whose handwriting it is. In his thoughts, he asked his mother if she was looking too. Her son became the commander of the Shining Dragon. Let her keep watching because this is just the beginning. And now he knows who he's become. Currently, the Shining Dragon squad consisted of 53 people. He appointed the experienced Dihu, who was the former commander of the Black Blade squad, as the vice commander and Un Chu as the protector. None of the privates opposed the 5 becoming team leaders. This result was obvious because of their past positions. Murim understood that the single-bladed sword, double-bladed sword, bow, spear, and stick were the 5 weapons used in the 8 Heavens soul art. An unexpected twist. Those 5 would clearly be of use. Murim gathered everyone and ordered the first group to come forward. Yen came out and said they were waiting for instructions. Murim told Chu that his job was to fight the first subgroup. Did he understand the instructions? Chu asked with surprise at the heir. Was he serious? How long can one be bludgeoned out of it? Murim replied that he didn't know. The main thing is not to kill anyone. Chu started laughing in a weird voice and said that the heir just ruined making cripples out of them. Murim punched him and replied that he said no such thing. Chu said he doesn't play that way. It's better to give him the task then. Murim replied that Deha is weak. Deha heard such words and said he could do it. Murim asked, realistically? Let him act then. Deha realized that the heir was going to give him this assignment from the beginning. Yen asked the commander, is he joking? He apologizes for the expression. But what kind of circus is this? Murim replied that he wasn't kidding. Their vice commander is not an idiot. How did he think he killed Mug Inpi then? And replied that he would look at his skills then. Could he fight him in a one-on-one battle? Deha replied that he agreed and told him to start. Deha realized that in the Great Wedge, Punen was considered one of the best fighters. Even in one-on-one combat, he is not an easy opponent, and would use his own subordinates against him, and immediately lunged at him. But Deha abruptly stepped back behind the guy, and grabbed his arm. Yen asked, did he have no pride at all? Let him fight fair. Deha asked if pride alone would help him win. If a man wants to achieve something, sometimes he has to take a shit. Murim smiled and said it was his school. He ordered Chu to have him take over for Day when he was exhausted. Have them do the same with the rest of the subgroups. Chu replied that he understood and asked how long they should be beaten. Murim said until they beg for mercy. That day was the beginning of the Shining Dragon Squad's murderous training. When Yong Chu entered the battle, the squad members had to pick up their weapons, squeezing all their strength out of them. However, they never managed to overpower the one who was single-handedly defending Cole's gang. After a few days, all of them had forgotten what pride was. And just a month later, at the crossroads of summer and fall, the head of the demonic forest assigned the squad its first task. The servant came and said that the heir had arrived. Mugan answered him to tell him to come in. Murim walked over and said that he welcomed the head of the demonic forest. Mugan said hello and replied that he was here chatting with the head of Narim until he arrived. So how did he squad up? Murim replied that he would say he would go. Mugan said that those warriors had previously held important positions in the Great Blade. Because of their pride, they might not be easy to deal with. Murim replied to the chapter that he was right. In his head he thought, why is the head going around and around? Could something be wrong? Mugan asked the heir. He hasn't seen Urim yet. Has he? Murim replied that since they say so, obviously they will meet soon, specifically on the mission at hand, which is likely to be extremely difficult. Murim said to have them ready. Have them hand it over. Mugan said the letter said his wife's family is now in Pagan County, a journey that takes about 10 days. The family is small, but Rajchan is a household name there. We need to find my father-in-law and brother-in-law. They're missing. Murim asked in surprise. Missing? Hogan replied that there are all kinds of rumors floating around. Some say it's Sanction's doing, and others suspect the Sura of the Bloody Sky and the Demon of Madness. Murim realized that things were bad. The last two refer to the three great villains. But since Sankan is also despised, it makes four great evils together. Hogan said that if there were really three great evils involved, they should not hesitate to ask for help. Despite their inhumane acts, they are almost as strong as the 10 strongest warriors. In the process of transmitting the demonic forest's teachings, he realized they assimilated new knowledge at a brilliant speed. However, this is not enough to fight against real martial artists. Therefore, this mission is more about gathering information. Murim said that then they would set off right away. They would have to hurry, for it was not clear whether the missing people were alive or not. Mugan told him to be careful. Hogan also wished the heir good luck. Murim replied that he promised to be back soon. Murim met with his men and said they had too little information about the Murim. Let the boy find out with the others about Sichuan matters, conflicts and weaknesses. Jin Huan asked if he should guard him. Murim replied that he shouldn't sweat it. Chu will take care of that. He's a little dumb, but he's not completely stupid. Murim remembered and asked if he had heard from Manhwa yet. Jin Huan replied that he had not heard from Manhwa yet. Sanshin includes all the worldly mountains and rivers. However, those who have been engaged in brigandage for several decades will not change by the snap of their fingers. Sanshin is pursuing the goal of coexistence with the Murim. At such an important time, all those who are in the way are disposed of and the useful labor force is brought forward. And all this time, Sanshin hadn't touched anyone and had a good relationship with the demon forest. Why bring him into this now? Murim said that if you solve one problem, another problem appears. And if you solve the second one. Jin Huan asked the Lord if he was all right. Murim replied that it was okay, he could go. He has to go now too. Jin Huan said he was listening. Yen told the team that they had been enduring this abuse for a month. His whole body was breaking down. Cho replied that he was slowly getting used to it. Yu replied that he was grateful that he could just live. Cho said that it seems like it's in a world of its own. Hu replied that he didn't want to die here. He had plans to open a small shop after his service. Cho said that such a thing is actually dangerous. Hu replied to have them look at it. It's a piece of jewelry his sis made for him. He promised to bring her new clothes if he came back. Cho started yelling and told them to wake up. It's just a drill. The protector and the vice commander aren't going to kill them. Suddenly Murim came into the room with his foot and told his men it was time to move out. Cho cried and thought that he had forgotten about the commander. Murim told them to pack their bags, for they were going to Pagan. And they don't have time, they have to go fast. Murim smacked the back of Yu's head and was surprised at such a thing, for she spanked like a baby's butt. And so the demon forest, the Shining Dragon squad with 57 people went on a Pagan campaign. Murim said he was told the journey would take 10 days, but they would get there in 6. Let them see that no one lags behind. And so 6 days later they were at the entrance to Pagan County. The girl was telling her mistress that she had heard something interesting on the way. The mistress asked, "Interesting?" The girl replied that the demonic forest had destroyed the Great Blade Clan and regained supremacy. Madame said that at one time, the demon forest was considered the strongest clan in Sichuan. It seems that they are not easily broken. The girl replied that it was rumored that the heir of the demonic forest had come up with the plan for victory. Wouldn't they wonder how he managed to crush the great blade? The disciple of divine sword beautiful flower Tang Reiwa said that they would soon find out everything for themselves. Soon to be recognized? What does he mean by that? Reiwa replied that the demon forest is capturing the Chan family. They can't not know about what happened. The girl said that if the Lord of Sanshin was involved, they should contact the flower bell and wait for reinforcements. Reiwa asked her what she wanted to say, that she was not his equal yet. The girl replied that she was only worried about her. Reiwa said that however, if the faceless Mountain King was involved in the incident, she wanted to see for herself. The girl asked Madam, what did she say about the son of the clan head of the 8 Emperor clan who had instigated the celestial battle? Reiwa replied that according to her teacher, the Silver Valley warriors were stronger than the Middle Clan commanders. Even their flower bell could not stand up to them without someone else's help. And if the son of the head of the 8 emperors became the ruler of the Silver Valley, you can't turn a blind eye to it. The girl asked Madam if she remembered the rumors about the invincible monster sucking the yin energy out of opponents. They were also spread by the trading company that gave Sanshin his position. Or maybe what she's worried about is also an empty rumor from the trading company. Reiwa replied that there was logic in what she was saying. She thought that Sankan had stated that he sought coexistence with the rest of the world. After their arrival, the security level of trade campaigns had increased significantly compared to what it was before, and the true identity of their leader remains in question. But she doesn't think they're likely to cause a bloodbath. Reiwa said that she too is skeptical of all rumors, but even those should not be dismissed out of hand. That's the mission of their clan. The girl turned around and said that those warriors didn't seem to be from here, and just in case it was better to use the disguise technique. She immediately used the technique and asked, is it normal? The girl replied so she wouldn't worry. Even one of the 10 strongest warriors wouldn't suspect anything. But Murim walked beside them and even saw everything. The girl asked the mistress if she could see. Murim asked Da if he had seen those 2 girls. Chu said they were beauties. The heir got angry and told him to shut up. Murim said it looks like they are going to Peijin. Once they reach the village, have him put a couple of men on them. Deha asked, to those girls? Murim replied that this was correct. After all, one of them is under disguise. We have to make it look nice. Deha asked the heir, did he say under disguise? But he didn't feel anything like that. Murim replied that the texture of the skin is slightly disturbed. That's something that can only be done intentionally. Well, or there's a problem with the face itself. They're both very good at hiding their inner energy. Tell him to tell the privates to be careful or they'll get burned. So they arrived in Peijin County. Chu said that it was strange that there was no one in the street. Deha replied that he agreed. It was as quiet as if bandits had been here. Murim said they would find out from the Zhang family. When they arrived, they should let the horses rest and take a breather. Was the faceless Mountain King really behind everything? Then why did Sankan expand his area of influence to such a remote area? And this kind of action doesn't seem to fit with the way Sanshin has existed up until now. He's betting it's a joke by a mad demon. And he's heard that the faceless Mountain King is a bit more cunning. Murim realized that this was really strange. There is no one in these surroundings who could spread rumors about him, and the deserted streets suggest kidnappings or a killer on the prowl. He's not comfortable with Sanshin coming in. A guard of the Chan clan was standing guard and suddenly noticed that some strange people were coming towards them. We said that judging from their clothes, they are from Chongqing? Murim replied that was correct. The Shining Dragon Squad arrived on the orders of the head of the demonic forest. Wai said that they had been waiting for them. However, they arrived a little earlier than expected. Let him escort them inside. Murim said that all the subgroups could rest, and he will go and see his aunt, and replied that he understood everything. Wai told the heir that they were probably already aware of the fact that Madame was currently replacing Head Chan. That's precisely why she doesn't have the opportunity to return to the demon forest. Wai told Mistress that he had brought the Shining Dragon Commander. Mistress replied that it was so fast. Murim introduced himself and said that he welcomed Mrs. Zhang. Deha also introduced himself. Inren said that she heard that they contributed greatly to the battle between the demonic forest and the Great Blade. She is amazed by their bravery. Inren said the right thing to do would have been to offer them a taste of good tea. But the cutoff of supplies had made their situation much worse. Murim replied that everything was fine. Simple water would suffice. He was surprised that he saw almost no people on the way to the Chan estate. Inren replied that they kept finding the bodies of their warriors. Father and brother were returning from the capital at the time. 50 li from Peijin to the west is the Hollow of Deep Soul. It was there that the men disappeared. Murim asked if they had searched that hollow. Inren replied that of course they had, but they had not been successful. Because it was a very important trip, The trading company was accompanied by 20 elite warriors. Murim said he was sure the corpses staged by the enemy meant something. Didn't they get some kind of message? Inren replied that they had, when they had just about given up all hope of finding the missing alive. A corpse with a letter was delivered to the manor, and 3 million silver pieces are demanded of them. The enemy asks to send a receipt with that amount. Deha saw the letter and felt that the handwriting was rough, but there was a sense of strength in the lines. And if the author was skilled in martial arts, he had reached a decent level. Murim asked, "Is the Zhang clan that rich? 3 million silver is not a small amount of money." Inren replied that 3 million silver was their family's fortune in 10 years. The killers asked for something that was beyond their power to give, no matter how hard you tried. They said they would send 1 corpse a day until they met their demands. And this is the 5th. We can't drag this out any longer. Murim thought about it because she must have been very scared. Auntie is a strong woman. Murim said, surrendering to him. The kidnappers know as well as they do that they don't have that kind of money. They most likely considered the fact that the Zhang clan and the Demon Forest are brothers-in-law. However, the scoundrels made a huge mistake in contacting them. He makes a promise that the Shining Dragon Squad will bring their men back safe and sound. Have them report back if they need anything. He wishes them luck and thanks them for their understanding. Murim tells Da that they're moving on to the search. Have him contact all the commanders and get them down here. But suddenly all of a sudden someone opened the door and rushed in. Murim was surprised and asked, "What's that little thing? And is she not bruised?" The girl said he used the hammer technique right in front of the heiress. Not bad. Murim asked what was she talking about. The girl replied that judging from the fact that she doesn't know his name, she's some nameless pawn. The girl said her name is Cho Urim. She is the beauty of Sichuan. Very soon, the whole world will lie at her feet. Murim said that she was Urim. He thought that, and how did such calm parents have such a Dereza? Murim said he understood and asked where are her front teeth. Urim replied that she wanted to exchange them for goodies. Murim laughed and said that it was surprising that she was joking in such a situation. Urim replied that tears would not change anything. If she's going to be sad, the others will be sad too. And from the looks of it, he's the heir from Chongqing. So what should we call him? Murim replied for her to call him Henim. Urim rejoiced and shouted that she was glad to meet Henim. They would see each other again. Murim told his men that they would move out in 2 hours. Deha asked in surprise, 2 hours? Have they figured something out yet? Murim replied that he would deal with it now. If this is not a simple kidnapping but a hostage-taking, they are acting the same way they did during the incident with the branch. Murim said that since there are many hostages, it is unlikely that they are being held in Peijin. Otherwise, if someone escaped, the kidnappers would be identified immediately. Murim told his men that they would search all the villages around Deep Soul Hollow. We need to operate covertly, and the vice commander in charge, and have them check to see if any strangers have bought food lately. We need to find out everything food-related. And don't rule out the possibility of theft. And realized that was right. The hostages needed something to feed them. He asked the commander why not ambush the enemy in Peijin. Murim replied that the lives of the hostages could then be jeopardized. This is a good option, but their first priority is to save Hedjong and his son. And don't forget to meet with the hunters as well. We must find out if anyone has found any bones in the mountains and if any animals have disappeared from traps. Deha at this time saw that it was as if there were no barriers in front of the air. Maybe it's because his father is a hunter? At times like this, he becomes a completely different person. Murim told them to remember, the most important thing is not to execute the kidnappers, but to save the hostages. Cho told the commander that the 2 girls he was talking about had literally just arrived here recently. He instructed the guards to follow them. Murim replied that that was it. Well, then he would have to meet them first. Let them rest while he would be back soon. Murim told Deha to stay with the subgroup commanders, and Chu have him follow immediately. Deha thought, did those 2 girls really have such strong energy? Chu said they went into the inn. They're not going to eat anything? He's so thirsty. Murim asked him if he'd had dinner. Chu replied that he'd had dinner, but not a lot. But suddenly Murim froze for a few seconds and turned his head toward the roof. The girl realized that the guy looked in his direction from such a distance. Coincidence? She can't believe that someone other than their clan is able to sense the Death Cliff shadow technique. If it's not an accident, that guy is dangerous. We must report it to the lady quickly. But suddenly Murim caught up with her and asked her where she was going. Reiwa was sitting in the inn at the time, saying that Sojong was delayed. Could something be wrong? But suddenly Sojong shouted to her mistress from outside. Reiwa was surprised and asked her if she had found anything. Sojin replied to the lady that she begged her pardon, but she had been caught, and they came with her. Reiwa was surprised and thought that there was no way there could be such a thing. Even the 10 strongest warriors couldn't recognize Sojong's technique. Chu asked the girl if she had had dinner. Would she like to keep them company? Murim asked him why he was talking so strangely. Chu replied that the air doesn't understand. Girls like that kind of thing. Murim asked him. Sojin thought, are these two really that strong? Reiwa asked them what was the matter. Murim replied that it was his question. He just came here for a drink. Murim told Chu to order whatever he wanted, and they can have a shot. Chu replied to the commander that he would be right there. Murim asked the girl stranger if she would keep them company. After all, he is so eager to find out who they are.